The RTM budget meeting on April 10th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. The first item that we're going to take up tonight is actually the Registrar of Voters to accommodate one of our registrars who has to leave early. So I'll invite the two registrars up. Do we not have value? That's a little better. Do we have our other registrar? I thought I saw him come in. Can somebody grab Matt? So for the department heads, you should assume that we've watched the Board of Finance meetings. So if you want to give us an update on anything that's changed in your budget, any particular changes from last year versus this year, or any other highlight that you want to share with us, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll open it up to questions. So welcome, and with that, I'll open it up to you guys. You have to hold the button down for 3 seconds.
On TV last night.
Right.
Testing 1, 2. Okay. Just want to go over those few things. 2 things were changed at the Board of Finance, and that was there was an increase in the balance of just in case $2,000 so that we don't run out, and hopefully we don't have to use that money, but we'll only use them if we do. Use it if we do. And then the other change was it was a mistake that I had made. I had put in $250 we wanted to get a bunch of signs because they're getting very old, and Matt had actually put in $1,500, and somehow I must have erased his $1,500, but they restored that. That was for our office supplies. So it was printing and binding, and that was an increase of $2,000 and $1,500 added to office. Office supplies. Excuse me, and that's pretty much what I have. Well, just so you know, the ballots are being ordered for the election in November for the municipal election, and also for the presidential preference primary in April 20 for fiscal 20.
Just a couple of quick observations, I guess, asking about sort of programmatic changes. One thing that we have started doing differently versus previous years is we have begun rolling in the primary not in the contingency, but into our budget. So that is the lion's share of the increase you'll see over previous sort of proposed budget cycles for us. The other thing that we have added as a sort of a service in this budget is the sort of the greatest complaint that we have, most frequent complaint we have is people who go to vote in primaries and find that they are not in the party they expected because they registered some time ago or they filled out a form, at the DMV or something like that. So we're going to, as we have had good luck with the pre-election mailing, telling people voting information for the people at their address, we are also going to do one pre-primary, notifying people of the deadlines and their current party status so that they can be in the party they would like to be in when the primaries roll around.
Thank you. Any questions for the registrars? Representative Spoliar.
Marcy Spoliar, District 4. I was just wondering, I don't know if it pertains to this budget year or not, but if the state was to approve early voting, would that impact your budget at all?
We're not certain about that, whether that would be involving the town clerk or us yet. But if it does involve us, we'd have to have pretty much a full-time person, because that would be, I don't know how we do it actually yet. And I think it could be pretty costly, because they'd have to be there pretty much all day, or we'd have to be there, and it could be. I don't know the answer for sure.
Thank you.
I think you'll find that the measures being proposed at the state capitol would require a constitutional amendment that would be voted on in November of 2020. So if there is a change, and it's good to be alert to that, I don't think you would see that happen until the subsequent fiscal year.
Any other questions? Representative Lopez.
Erin Lopez, District 2. This is kind of a silly question, but On election day this past year, I know that there were not stickers available at.
We got millions.
We ran. Okay. It seems silly, but I know that a lot of people were, talking about it, and I know it's not necessarily your job to produce the stickers, but it was just something I was.
We got lucky. We got a whole cachet of them.
Okay, thank you.
We heard everybody loud and clear.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Thanks for your presentation. Next, we have legal services. I'm going to recuse myself and leave the room and hand it off to the moderator.
All right. Legal services is on page 75.
If anyone has any questions,
Attorney
I'd be happy
Lesser?
to answer.
Representative Durrell?
Can you hear? Yes. Oh, right. Thank you, Alex Durrell, District 3. Yes, Stanton. In January 2018, the town paid a $2.1 million lawsuit settlement with a woman who her bike fell over the crates and things. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Did that change our insurance policy? How was that paid? Did it increase? Is that a normal amount?
Without getting too much into the weeds, the bulk of that was paid by our insurance carrier. I have no idea whether it affected our insurance rates. You'd have to talk to risk management about that. That was our carrier's decision to settle the case. That's basically all I'll say about it.
Okay. You don't know if the risk management fee went up or not? I guess I could look.
I do not know.
No. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, you're free to go.
Thank you. I'm being released, is that what you're saying?
Thanks for showing up. And the moderator is back.
Next, we have Fair TV. Page 49. Good evening. If there's anything you want to tell us, if not, we'll just open up to questions.
Everything status quo.
Okay. Any questions for Fair TV? Seeing none, that was easy. You're all set. Thank you. Next, we have Town Planning and Zoning. Page 59.
Good evening. Jim Wendt, Planning Director. I don't have a presentation beyond what was said at Board of Finance. Beyond the salary payroll line item, the budget is a net reduction of a little over $700.
Any questions for Town Planning and Zoning? Oh, Representative Gerber.
Hello? Hey, Mr. Wendt, Bill Gerber. Nice to see you. With all of the major projects coming up, do you have the staff to handle the TOD, both TODs, the TOD and some of the other, and Exide and all the major projects that we're looking to do over the next few years?
Yes, I believe so. We're wrapping up our TOD grant project that was a joint effort through the Economic Development Commission and Mark Barnhart's office. We will have a report to present publicly within the next month, I would assume. But beyond that, our POCD effort, we have enough staff, we believe, to do that in-house. So the answer to that question, I believe, is yes.
Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. In looking over the budget, I was wondering, for town planning and zoning, enforcement, which category would that come under? I'm in District 9, and there's a lot of concern in District 9 where people put in rain guard or get approved based on a rain garden. They don't install it. They put in, these sort of alternate, less expensive water mitigation systems. And I'm just wondering where enforcement of the zoning, I'm sure there's a cost of people going around and checking facilities. So I was just wondering, what category would that fall under?
Well, you won't see that in the budget line item. There's not a line item for that. There are staff within the staff line item. We have a zoning enforcement officer staff person within the department. The example you raised would be a joint effort between our office and the engineering department with respect to drainage. But there's not a specific line item for enforcement. There's personnel. Within the personnel account, we have enforcement staff.
Okay, because when we talk about synergy, you know, I've been sent to conservation, I've been sent to engineering, I've been sent to zoning, and I just want to make sure that the town, in our neighborhood where this kind of, you know, water can really impact the adjacent property. So I'm just trying to make sure that there is synergy between these departments. And that residents who call in to notify one department is then, you know, the information is given and followed up. So again, I don't want it to be like oh, I don't have the money, I don't have the staffing, and then again, fall through the cracks.
We collaborate very closely with our colleagues in the engineering department and in the conservation department, and I'm confident that we can address any issues that come up.
Okay, because it's important, I think, that the town does that, because no neighbor wants to get into a scuffle with their neighbor. So if it's approved based on certain issues, I would really appreciate you guys working together and following up and making sure people follow what's been designated for their properties.
I agree, and I'm confident we can do that.
Thank you very much.
Further questions? Representative Fogel.
David Fogel, District 1, just a quick question. It says you requested a 4.6% increase due to wage settlement of various bargaining units. And can you just explain what that is?
That's just the salary increases that are obligated through the union contracts.
Okay, because in other places in the book, that's how it's described. I haven't seen this language, wage settlement of various bargaining units. But basically it's just contractual obligations. Okay, 4.6 seems a little high relative to some of the other departments.
Well, I think that's last year's budget, it was actually a reduction. There was a staff turnover, and there was new staff people brought in at a lower salary scale, so now it's year 2, second year of that person, so they're moving up a step on the bargaining unit salary scale.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thanks for coming, Jim.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Health Department. Page 221.
Good evening, Stan Scleary, Fairfield Health Department.
So you can give us a thumbnail sketch, you can give us an update, tell us some changes, or just take questions.
Nothing changed since the Board of Finance presentation. Our biggest change was a last-minute thing where we had a few students that were high acuity students that would necessitate full-time nursing coverage at a private school where we had part-time, and so we were requesting $18,900 or 14.5 hours per week increase to cover that school to provide full-time coverage there. You know, there's a state statute that says we have to provide the same level of coverage in private schools as we provide in public schools. In a public school situation, students of that acuity would have full-time nursing coverage, and so that was about the only last-minute big change, which was just a few days before the Board of Selectmen meeting that we became aware of this. We were able to get it in at the Board of Selectmen and at the Board of Finance.
Questions for the Health Department? Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. Hi, Stans.
Hi.
Do you regulate lead contamination at all?
We regulate, in some areas, yes. Some areas it falls under the state. We deal with lead-poisoned children and abating homes.
Okay. Do you ever work with the HDC in terms of trying to promote some information to homeowners who own older homes and trying to improve the ways people are painting inside and outside their homes and how it might lead to some lead contamination issues?
So we're, on a variety of issues, we're always doing education. We actually have a video on our website about making sure you're doing work in a lead-safe manner. We have our PB Safe campaign that we push it every now and then, typically at, community health fairs and things like that, where we get people to sign pledges to ensure that they hire an RRP certified contractor that understands how to do work in a lead-safe way, and if they're doing the work themselves, just to take the time to educate themselves on how to do it. So we have educational content, and at various times throughout the year, we'll push that out. Typically coming up this May, we'll do a little push when people start thinking about home renovations for the summer months.
Is there a way to monitor when people do exterior work to their homes to make sure that they're not contaminating other abutting properties with the lead? So
with that, there's really no permit required to paint the exterior of a home, so we don't become aware of that. So how it's dealt with through the EPA is that any home that is a contractor disturbing any certain square footage of painted surface of a home that's built before 1978 has to have a certain level of training and is supposed to conduct testing and make the homeowners aware of that there's a potential issue here and understand the hazards that may result in that.
Okay, because it has caused some remediation costs for the town, hasn't it, in the past? So does that affect your budget at all? There was a remediation episode on Turney that I'm aware of that the town had to get involved in.
The impact there is really just, it would be if we had unionized staff responding on a weekend, there may be some union costs. We wouldn't engage in actually paying for any of the remediation effort. On that particular incident, I responded, so you get me for free on the weekends.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions for the Health Department? Representative Gerber.
Hi, Sands. Bill Gerber, District 2. I am wondering with vaccinations, I'm not sure everyone's aware that you sort of do that year-round, but have you seen an uptick in demand for vaccinations, and are you staffed to handle that?
I haven't seen any uptick in demand at this point. We have a good staff, and we have an ability to deliver a lot of vaccines in a very quick time. We do 1,000 a day when we're doing flu clinics, so we can get them out there if need be. And we've got our Medical Reserve Corps, 350 volunteers that can step up and assist us in any way.
How about Zika and West Nile virus? Last year, I think we had some, or at least with West Nile, we had some cases. And is that an issue for you?
Again, we're like with lead, with mosquitoes, we have a sort of seasonal campaigns and we'll be starting that coming up in May to getting people to understand the things they can do around their homes to prevent mosquitoes from breeding around their property. So we'll be taking those efforts, stepping them out. But yes, every year, usually in mid-August, usually when I'm on vacation, we get a report of a positive mosquito pool with a Zika mosquito, and then every few years we'll get typically a single case I'm saying West Nile virus positive, not Zika positive, West Nile positive mosquitoes, and we'll get a West Nile case every few years. So our effort is really to get homeowners to do all they can to remediate those. We will treat areas on public land or areas that we get complaints about, for example, abandoned pools and things like that. We will go out and treat those to ensure that they are not providing breeding places for mosquitoes.
Thank you. One last question. You're often talked about in terms of whenever we have these new initiatives, it's like, oh yeah, Sands will handle it. Example, smoking, Tobacco 21 may be coming up, maybe statewide, as well as plastic bag ordinance and things like that. Are those issues sort of anticipated in your budget? Will we have to, sort of call on reserves to fund some of that stuff if it happens this year?
Well, I think when the plastic bag ordinance passes, I think we'll have there's a period of a time for those affected to remove their stocks and go through them and order new supplies. So I don't think it'll affect us this year. I mean, I don't think the enforcement period will start until probably next fiscal year, and then we'll see. We don't, from experience of other towns, we don't anticipate a high level of enforcement activity, you know, that we think there'll be relatively easy compliance, and we'll get a few outliers, but, you know, we send out order letters every day, so it's to add one or two here and there, I don't think is a big issue for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Spoliar.
Marcy Spoliar, District 4. I'm not sure if this is your area or not, but I recently saw an article that Connecticut got a failing grade on lead in their school water systems, and it brought up a point. Our schools were not mentioned, but I was just curious if our schools are tested for lead in the water.
Yeah, so every school, every school that has a child care program in it does testing to comply with state requirements. I think Tom Cullen might be able to answer in terms of the rest of the schools. I think thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. This is all interesting information, but it's all department-related operations and not line item budget questions. Please, can we please stick to the budget and take some of these other conversations offline?
Thank you. Can you tie the question to the budget, or?
I'll ask offline.
Okay, that's fine. Any other questions? Representative Lopez.
Hi, just a quick line item question. Actually, so we're providing, I know that your department provides the nurses for the schools. Who pays for the supplies? Is that part of your budget, or is that a school like BOE?
So it's a mix, so that each nurse is given a small budget of a few $100s per nursing suite from the school for the basic supplies. Some of the supplies come from our office, you know, for example, where when we had to upgrade our bags, you know, we have to cover, you know, the bags that the nurses take out to the playground, things like that. We cover that. We cover the private school supplies. So it's a mix, you know, and we'll work with the Board of Ed if there's a large expense, you know, we'll talk to them and they'll say, oh, yeah, we think we can cover that this year, and, you know, so we'll work
That
with them.
synergy we keep talking
Yep.
about.
Yep. No, they're a great partner with us, and we have a great relationship. And so, like when I call Tom, he's right here, you know.
Any further questions? Representative Fogel.
David Fogel, District 1. There are two line items for nurses, 05 and 06. Can you just distinguish the two?
Sure. It's basically the level of training for the nurse. So there's an associate's level nurse and a bachelor's level nurse. And so the 5 and 6 is the associates and the bachelor's level nurses.
And it looks like there's 22 total between the two lines, 22 individuals this year for the budget, and last year that number hasn't changed, right? In other words, no additional nurses, correct?
In terms of the...
I'm sorry, I said, 20, it was 5 and 17 last year. This year you're asking for 4 and 18 is what I'm seeing on page 223.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you there on okay, well, let me just see here.
Either way, you're not asking for more personnel, is that right?
No.
Okay.
No.
And then I'm just curious, has that number changed much over the years? Because we only have 2 years with the actual number of individuals, but then looking at the total payroll going back to 16, it's gone up 10% or so, but have we always been around 22? Do you know?
Yeah, we haven't had any significant increase in our nursing staff. I believe 8 years ago we went up 1 part-time nurse and 2 health aides the year prior to that that we brought through the budget process. Other than that, this additional position, based upon student population, that's the only change in the last, you know, I think it's 7 or 8 years.
Right. Okay. And last question. I'm just curious I'm a little new at this, but why is the cost of school nurses in your budget and not in the school budget?
So throughout the state, school nursing, it falls under both entities. So for example, Stanford, Milford, they have school nursing under the health department. It provides, in two ways, it provides some cost sharing in the sense that we have to have a medical advisor for the health department to oversee our clinical procedures and policies, and then the school needs a school medical advisor as well. And so we have one doctor serving in both roles. Plus it provides an independence that the school nurse doesn't, while reports to the principal for internal administration of the school, but in terms of policy and practice, reports to a nursing supervisor and a physician. So it's a separate chain of command when it comes to clinical activities and requests for things to be done. So the nurses get asked to do all sorts of crazy things, and sometimes the doctor has to challenge that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Representative Dean.
Are there any, Heather Dean, District 3, are there any other additional services you would like your department to provide? Rather, I'm sorry, are there any additional resources you would like your department to have, and how would you utilize them?
Any additional service? So, you know, there's, you know, this is something that we're always looking for efficiencies in the department, and that's we're going through a process right now of a new strategic plan, and so we're working through that right now. Our next 5-year, we just finished one. We're doing another 5-year strategic plan for our department, and so we'll be looking at some of those things. I think probably the biggest area where, and I've been having discussions with IT on this somewhere down the road, is when the town, if the town goes with a town-wide permitting inspection system, that would probably be the greatest benefit to us. Is, you know, we're currently operating on sort of, you know, one guy who's a programmer who wrote a program, and, you know, that, you know, while it works for us, you know, it's if he's not around, we're going to have some problems. And so that's one area that we're looking to improve the way we do things, is our technology side of what we do. I think that by improving that is a way that we can hold our costs down in terms of staffing and being able to maintain what we have. If we can, you know, get a town-wide buy-in on a permitting inspection system, you know, because we're facing a change in our food code. We're switching from an old state code to the FDA model food code, and so that'll have some fiscal impacts for us in terms of the inspection process and the technology used for that.
Thank you.
Representative Gerber.
Mr. Cleary, thanks. Bill Gerber, District 2. Your grants that you receive a few different grants, right? Are they sort of solid at this point, or are they subject to change?
We've been advised from the State Department of Public Health that our per capita grant will be cut approximately 20% off of the level, the funding. We're currently at a 12% reduction, so what they do is they fund it fully each year, and then they reduce it by a certain percentage. We've been told it's going to be a 20% reduction off the top of that, so that's about a $15,000 reduction. Not total, but from year over year, it'll be you know, a little bit less than that, you know, another $4,000 or $5,000, because we're currently at a 12% reduction. So that's one, but, you know, we've just secured an opioid grant for $5,000 to do opioid prevention work to hire a graduate degree student over the summer. We just secured a $13,000 grant to conduct a measles tabletop exercise. So, you know, we're having some good success in that area.
Your school-based dental hygienist, is that grant secured for? Or?
So the dental hygienist is town funded, so that's, you know, it's a full-time 10-month position. We do have the functionality to have, we received a grant about 15 years ago of $150,000, and we have been, you know, sort of supporting the free care that we do from that funds that we received. So it's been balancing it out. Our dental hygienist we get insurance reimbursements for the cleanings that they do on insured children. And so that money goes into that account and kind of keeps it level. That enables us to pay for anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 of free dental care for students in need in the town each year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Sands.
Thank you.
Next, we have Human and Social Services, page 225.
I'm Julie DeMarco, this Director of Human Services.
Good evening. So, there's anything you want to update? Otherwise, we'll just open it up
We're
to
good.
questions. Any questions for Human and Social Services? Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. And thank you for all of the help that you gave on the mailer. I don't think that we could have gotten it done in time for this season, so thank you so much. An issue came up during the Board of Finance Forum about the senior center itself, and I wanted to see if you wanted to address any of those issues that came up at the forum.
We're talking about the
any facility deficiencies, and I thought that there was a plan to renovate certain areas of the senior center, and I wanted to see if you could cover that.
Sure. So one of the issues that came up in the Board of Finance was the condition of our bathrooms, which are not ADA compliant. A few years ago, it was approved to have some upgrades to the doors. We had 2 automatic doors, actually 3 automatic doors for the outsides, and then 2 automatic doors for a men's room and a woman's room. But the bathrooms were not renovated. I've working with Joe Michelangelo about getting a plan to renovate maybe a bathroom a year so that we can do that. We can't get a grant for that because we're in a floodplain, so we'll be paying for that. So it's in the works. It's a slow go, but it is in the works. What was the other one? Sorry about that.
That was really it, whether there was a plan that you're following to make some of these improvements that were mentioned during the Board of Finance Forum.
We're working right now on a brand new 3 to 5 year plan. We don't have a strategic plan right now. So I can tell you where I want the end of the story, but we have to work on the steps to get there. And the bathroom is one, the kitchen is one, but these are down the road and we need a plan for it. So that's what we're working on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 3. Hi, Julie. Thanks for coming out. I just wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to meet with the local Model Railroader Club and being able to work things out so that we could have another train club event this coming October. They've been doing this for over 30 years. It's a wonderful community builder for train enthusiasts and kids at heart who love trains. So thank you very much for that.
Representative Gerber.
Mrs. DeMarco, thanks for coming. Bill Gerber, District 2. The rides that you provide, do you have the capacity to provide all the transportation to meet the demand? Or do you ever have to say no to people?
We don't say no to people. We have a very robust transportation department, and we have 6 part-time drivers and 2 dispatchers. The frustration isn't that we have to say no, it's that there's, the hours. We just don't have the hours to go beyond 3:30. So we've put in for a grant this year for another bus and also for an operations grant, which we haven't applied for, so I don't know that we're going to get it. That would increase our hours to enable us to provide a late bus.
So it's not drivers, it's not buses, it's drivers, so you don't need an additional vehicle. It's more that you need someone to work after 3:30.
I'm not saying that, right? Not really. What it is that we have, what we have a demand for, we are meeting right now. I would like to see us able to offer afternoon doctor's appointments, for instance. We don't really have a demand for that because it's working, but it's going to be something we need. Evening programming, if we open again on weekends. It'd be nice to be able to offer those services.
And in terms of social services, like, psychologists and, or sociologists, psychologists, do you see an uptick in the need, and do you have the capacity to meet the demand for that?
We are meeting the demand. We have great social workers. They're all part-time. As our town grows and ages, we are going to have an increase in need. That's got to be part of that 5-year plan to figure out where we need those services and in which age groups. We have done a great job of fundraising for social services. for camperships and for back to schools and for holidays, and it's wonderful that the community supports that, and we don't need to put additional funds in the budget for that. Going forward, we at some point will need to add staff. Right now, not yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Lefkowitz.
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. And thank you for the work that you do. I'm just curious if you could talk for a moment about the biggest challenge that you faced in putting your budget together for this year.
It wasn't about the department. It was because it was my first budget. It was stressful. The finance department and the town is very helpful in assisting to do that. And it's hard to not ask for the world without a plan. So, you know, the hardest part was knowing that we really need a 5-year plan to plan out what the expenditures would be. But the hardest part for me was that I hadn't done it before.
Thank you.
Representative Fogel.
David Fogel, District 1. Thank you for being here. Nice to meet you. It seemed, just following up on the earlier comment, it seems to me ADA compliant bathrooms in a senior center is pretty important. So is that something that, at least for next year, you would prioritize?
Definitely.
Okay.
We have a new subcommittee of our Human Services Commission that's the Committee on People with Disabilities. And that is one of the items we're addressing. We're part of a needs assessment with Sacred Heart University students that are doing a townwide survey to find out where the gaps in services are, and that's going to help us to plan for the needs we have, not only for the senior center and social services, but for the town.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Julie.
Thanks.
Next, we have the library, both the main branch and the Fairfield Woods branch. The main branch starts on page 233.
Hello, Lee Murtha, Town Librarian, and I have Jan Fisher, Deputy Town Librarian with me. No changes since the Board of Finance meeting.
Okay. Are there any questions for the library, either branch? Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I use Libby, and I think the online availability is it's a good concept, but it's really difficult to take the books out. Is there any plan on increasing the budget for Audible books and those sort of 21st century kind of aspects of the library?
Yes. That's the line item that has the most of an increase, the materials line.
Yes.
And that would directly affect Libby and increasing digital offerings.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Representative Tallman.
Hi, Peter Tallman, District 8. I know at a couple of the meetings there were issues on Sundays, and there's double time, and we know there's entities that work 7 days a week, and somehow they get around that, as do our Parks and Rec Department and DPW. Is there any way you think you'd be able to do that so we're not paying double time on Sundays?
I am not involved in the union contract negotiation, so
Well, there
the question,
you go.
I can't answer
Thank
the
you
question.
very much.
You're welcome.
Representative Lefkowitz.
Just a comment. This is Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm thrilled that the use of technology is really going to be a focus. I have a child that relies on the services of special ed and uses the Audible book program, and the library has been a great resource and important for our family. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 3. First, I wanted to thank you very much for the program that you deliver books to childcare programs throughout the town. And my particular program uses it every month faithfully, and it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Are there any other services that you would like to be able to provide in the future other than what you have established already, ideally?
Ideally? It's a good question. I mean, we are doing homebound delivery, and we also do to the daycare centers, and I think that there's always growth in that area, and we support the schools a lot. So we've built a lot of good relationships also with the Bigelow Center, sending, the bus comes over every week and getting technology training to the seniors also. So expanding the services that we have, being able to do more outreach, that would be what we'd like to do.
Representative McDermott.
Mark McDermott, District 7. I just had a question concerning self-checkout. I go to Falmouth, Massachusetts a lot in the library there. I take my daughter there, and they have self-checkout for books. And obviously, you don't need somebody, a staff person, to be there to do that. Have we visited that or revisited that at all?
We did have it at one point. Do you?
Well, the system became.
Here we go.
We did have self-checkout when the library was renovated, and that system became antiquated, and there was a proposal to renew it, and it was a time of difficult finances, so we were not able to do that. At this point, I think we feel that there's so many things that are checked out, not actually in the library, our digital materials. That's the way things are going. And we still need people to do other things.
So to make the investment in the self-checkout right now is really
What is the cost of, if you know of such a system?
Not off the top of my head, I don't have that.
Could you find out for us, please?
Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank
coming. Next, we have the Penfield Pavilion Complex, page 241, I believe.
Good evening. Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation. I have my Assistant Director, Galen Brown, with me. Penfield, as far as Board of Finance went, there were no changes, except revenue, sorry. Revenue was increased from $31,000 for the concession to $41,000, and that was to include the $10,000 worth of utilities that the concessionaire is obligated to pay.
Any questions regarding the Penfield Pavilion Complex? Representative Barrett.
Steve Barrett, District 6. Having watched the Board of Finance meeting, that there's a 44% increase in the seasonal payroll, and that was, as you think you said, something to do with the moving of parking attendants from one budget to another?
Correct.
That $15,000, how many parking attendants does that pay for?
Off the top of my head, couldn't give you a specific number of parking attendants, or I'd have to do the math on the numbers, but it's roughly 1,300 hours worth of.
What beaches would that staff?
Penfield.
So just parking attendants
it
at
goes to Penfield.
So the parking attendants at Jennings, Lake Mohegan, Sasco, Southport would be out of the waterfront budget?
Still come out of the waterfront budget. Yeah, what we were trying to do is create the cost center of all the expenses for the Penfield complex. So we wanted to get that true number here in Penfield. So we think with this transfer, we'll get it this year.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Hi, Anthony. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Just to follow up on the new pavilion, there were some changes as far as lockers and items that could be rented by the residents. I was just wondering, as a profit center, are those meeting your expectations? Do they need to be marketed better? Are people still renting the lockers, and is it a good use of space?
Specifically lockers. We currently...
Or any other thing that could make us money?
Yeah, as far as the rentals go of this building here, we're on track to exceed our budget numbers. So that's great. And we still have what I'll call old money on the books. We book parties 2 years out in advance. So we still have parties that are coming in right now that may be paying the original $1,100 as opposed to the $3,000 and the $3,500 that they would technically be paying if they booked today. So we'll start seeing an increase in revenue just based on those rates alone. As far as the lockers go, we have 194 lockers, 19 of them are allocated to non-residents. We have a few handicap ones in there as well. We are just over about 105 currently rented for this upcoming season, which is down. We had about 150 that rented last year. We are starting, we're marketing it pretty hard, but we are going to start looking at, our rate structure there. So we're not really sure why people aren't renting lockers. And for everybody that is here, they're not like, metal lockers. They're more changing rooms, little square cubicles that you could leave your stuff in. I think they're a really good deal. We do get a lot of questions on them. Can families partner up? We used to say no. Now we say, if you want to split it with another family, go for it. We want to get the rentals in there. So,
Do you, 30 days prior to Memorial Day or 15 days prior to Memorial Day, do you have a fire sale and make sure they're all full and you get the maximum amount of revenue?
We didn't want to really do a fire sale because in Fairfield, the one thing we've realized is if you give someone else a deal, all the people that already have it, they're calling us up saying, hey, we want the same deal. But what we did start talking about, if we do have available space, is we'll start doing daily rentals and just put a number on that. So if someone walked up and said, hey, can we use the locker in the shower today? Absolutely, there'll be a fee associated. They pay it right then and there, and they're in for the day. Since we do have a locker attendant that stands, sits in that booth all day. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Representative Pistilli.
Oh, man, is it working? It's on. Sharon Pistilli, District 3. Sorry, I'm hearing impaired, so I couldn't hear that it was on. Just as an FYI, the feedback that I've seen on Facebook in terms of why people might be against renting the lockers is the 10 a.m. opening time, and that people who go to the beach early aren't able to get their stuff. And so I'm just wondering if there's probably not a way to increase the hours without increasing costs. So, yeah, so that's a problem unless it's secure enough that the key access could be trusted, that just not anybody is going in there.
Yeah, right now we don't have it. We actually physically have a person that sits there and they press the magnetic button that opens up the door for the people. They scan their card, so we know they have a membership, but then we hit the button physically. So it's not an actual, couldn't just put it on like a swipe and have them go in by themselves. Otherwise, that would be a good option, but that would cost us some money too.
Yeah, okay. And I actually rented a locker last year. And the other thing is, because of fire code, I suppose the doors have to swing in. Is that why?
Double check.
Because you can't, it's hard to fit stuff in there because the door swings in. So those are just two kind of customer service issues I've been aware of that might be a factor behind the locker.
Okay. Well, I'm going to follow up on that one. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thanks for coming. That's it. Thanks for coming. Sorry.
You want to hit the other budgets?
Oh,
or?
sorry, you're right.
I'll go home. Thank you.
Yeah,
no. I should have just went, right? Ran for the door.
Parks and Recreation, that's you too. Sorry. Page 244. Any questions on Parks and Recreation?
Well, you had a good feeling, Phil.
That was my
making
sense.
the right move there.
Representative Tallman, prove me wrong.
Hi, gang. Pete Tallman, District 8. Is this on the revenue side? Is that okay?
I'll allow it. That's fine.
I noticed the field rentals are going up considerably, like from 100,000 to 175, 106 to 175. Is that higher rates or more teams using the fields?
Really, it's just finally capturing all the user groups that are using the fields, are now helping defer the maintenance on them. So all your youth leagues, your little leagues, travel soccer, rec soccer, Pop Warner football, all those groups are now, they're paying the $25 a head. And then we do have outside rentals in the summer for camps and things of that nature.
Okay, and these are the same, I guess, fields that the high schools are using, in particular Ludlow? Because they only have the one field, as you know.
That is correct. So
how's the condition of the, I'd like getting the revenue, but are Little League teams playing better fields than the high school teams?
The conditions of the fields are improving. In my estimation over the last several years, as we get better weather, things are greener. We were able to take some fields offline in the last couple of years. Holland Hill, as you guys all know, has been down for construction for Board of Ed, so that field, once that comes back on, that'll free up some space. We did some renovations at Sherman Elementary where we redid the irrigation, we added irrigation, redid the field there. So that field was offline, now back online. Some of our softball and baseball fields have also seen some upgrades, so I believe the conditions of our fields are improving. So.
Okay, last question. If money was no object, would you want more turf fields?
Yes, I would want more turf fields.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions? Representative Havey.
Lisa Havey, District 6. Thank you very much. At the Board of Finance meeting, they added a line, or they added $25,000 to the Parks and Rec's budget. Is that not?
Not this budget.
Not this, okay.
No, it's the waterfront budget, which.
All right, well, how do you see that working in the Parks and Rec, and how do you see that affecting your personnel? Thank you.
I don't see it having an effect on personnel, but it does give us the ability, we'll talk about waterfront, but it does give us the ability to do emergency upgrades when needed, or if something pops up at the marina, it gives us the ability to do that, or work with Public Works to use that money to allocate it for that. You're welcome.
Any other questions on Parks and Rec right now? Jill Vergara, Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. I have a question about Representative Tallman's question with the turf fields. As you know, I have an issue with turf fields. What does that mean if you want to expand the turf fields? Aren't there restrictions for K-8 with turf?
Currently, no.
There isn't a restriction, a statewide restriction on turf?
No, the state is currently, it's in legislation right now, trying to put a moratorium on the use of crumb rubber. That has not been passed yet, still in committee from what the last email I had this afternoon. So as of right now, I don't believe that there is a moratorium unless that was passed between 4 o'clock and when I got here. So no, my opinion and my professional opinion would be if we could add more turf fields, I would add more turf fields because it gives us greater use and we save money on the wear and tear. Also, eventually you could put lights. It would be the thought, and then you expand your hours for field usage that way as well.
I really thought that there was a statewide ban on K-8 fields for elementary schools with turf. I'll have to look it up. But I know that Westport just issued a moratorium on all turf fields, so regardless of K-8, so for everyone.
Yes, Fairfield hasn't adopted that yet, but Westport did.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions on Parks and Rec? Representative Fogel.
David Fogel, District 1. So can you just explain, I believe there's a 3.9% increase that you're asking for your budget for this year, for this area, Parks and Rec. Can you just explain that? It looks like it's all in the salary line.
Correct. So union contracts were settled, essentially, so I believe there's retro pay involved in that, and that's what it is.
Okay, so no additional personnel?
No.
Okay.
And that should be a common theme that you would see amongst department to department.
It sure is, yeah. Let me ask you another question. Your compensation, I'm trying to track that, because is it across the two areas, or is it just under Parks and Rec?
All our full-time salaries are within Parks and Rec. So this counts the ones on page 247. You'll see 6 positions. That's my full-time staff for recreation.
And you personally are under Recreation Direct, like director?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on Parks and Recreation? Seeing none, we'll move to Waterfront and Marina. Page 248. Any questions on Waterfront and Marina? Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. What is the 25,000 sinking fund established from the with the Board of Finance? Did you have any input in that?
Well, they basically said that that's what they would like to do. So what the sinking fund gives us the opportunity to do is they're going to reduce our revenue. So the revenue line item that I believe is 660 will drop by $25,000. That $25,000 would go into this sinking fund, which the Parks and Rec Commission has authority to allocate. Again, going back to the representative over here's question, if an emergency came up at the marina and a dock needed to be replaced, that $25,000 could help offset that. But the way the sinking fund, my understanding would be, if we didn't spend that 25 this year, it carries over to next year, and if they allocate another 25, well, now we've got 50,000 in there. And the long-term goal would be to help offset larger projects, larger bonded projects, like the dredgings, dock replacements, things of that nature. So we're very much in favor of a sinking fund for that.
So you're anticipating it functioning like a contingency?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And did you have input in terms of what you were going to be using this for when this was created?
No, not at this point. That money has not been allocated to any one thing. The subcommittee, the Parks and Rec Commission has a marina subcommittee that is currently working on a long-term plan. Whether you want to call it a 5-year plan, a 7 or 10-year plan, that's what they're working on. And one of the largest items of that is a potential redesign of the entire marina. The marina is basically at its end of its useful life. It's about 40 years old. Docks need to be replaced. Boats are too close. We have too many boats down there right now. So again, that sinking fund could potentially help with that kind of stuff down the road.
It sounds like the Board of Finance created a line item in your budget.
They will. Yes, they will. It hasn't been, obviously it hasn't been set up yet, but it's going to reduce the revenue by 25,000 and it'll become this sinking fund, is my understanding.
Okay, that's just confusing to me because I thought that in terms of policy that the department heads and commissions guide the budget and that the Board of Finance really is not involved in that.
They voted on it.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Representative Durrell?
Yes, a constituent asked the dredging of the marina. What's the status? If this isn't the right time, then tell me where to go and we can talk.
Yeah, it doesn't come out of my budget. I mean, it's a bonded project. But just, the update on the dredging is they are in I believe the pre-application has been submitted. If everything gets approved through Connecticut Deep, then dredging would happen this winter as of October, or as early as October. That's the plan.
Further questions? Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. So back to the sinking fund, following up on Representative Vergara's question. So is it like a contingency fund, but called something different? And do you have total control over the sinking fund, or do you have to ask permission from the Board of Finance to access that money?
The way it was explained to me is it would be very much like my 124 revolving fund for Parks and Recreation, where anything, here's our programming fund, anything over $200,000 in that account gets swept back to the general fund. My understanding was this would have the $25,000 to start with, and I don't believe that I would need any permission from the Board of Finance to use that money. It would be money that if the Parks and Rec Commission or the subcommittee says, hey, we need to replace this dock down there, we have access to that money to do so.
Okay, so you, as the director, have sole control over how to spend that money?
With guidance from the Parks and Rec Commission.
Okay. I'd like you to follow up on that and make sure that that's the case with the sinking fund and get back to us.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Representative Fogel?
David Fogel, District 1 again. I meant to ask you this under Parks and Rec, but it's the same issue with the Waterfront and Marina. It's interesting. I haven't seen this in other departments. There's a significant decrease in payroll between 2016 and 2018. In the case of Parks and Rec, it's 25%. But then it jumps back up over the next few years to basically the same spot. Although I will say, under the waterfront, you still didn't catch up to where you were in 2016. Can you explain that?
Can. So with the Parks and Recreation budget, it just comes down to retirements. So the director that was here prior to me made a lot more money than I make currently. So they started me at a lower scale. I came from within the department, so my position was held vacant for a number of years. So they weren't paying that one out. Our assistant director retired after 39 years. So again, we hired an assistant director, Galen, at a lower cost than she was making. This past year, or just recent last few months, we just hired my old position. So now we're fully staffed, but that's why you see that number as low as it is. And it will creep back up because union contracts. As long as they keep going up, that line item will keep going up. As far as the waterfront payroll, that one decreased again because as Representative Perez brought up before, I transferred $15,000 for parking into Penfield, and actually this is 2 years in a row that I've done that.
Well, I was talking about the payroll for that. It's less money. It's not that.
Yeah, but that's all part-time payroll, so that's your
Right.
lifeguards, your
I
parking
see.
attendants.
Okay. And then the last, this is a comment. I'd just like to point out that your waterfront and marina budget is actually a decrease from last year, and I believe that's the first time we've seen that in any department. So, good work.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Barrett.
Steve Barrett, District 6 again. Just to satisfy some concerns of some constituents, that only cut to the seasonal payroll on the waterfront marina. That is strictly just those parking attendants moved over to Penfield.
Yeah, correct. So let me expand upon that because I know where you'll go with this. So I'll beat you to it. I don't expect any changes with the waterfront as far as lifeguarding staffing goes or parking attendants. Everything will be staffed as it has been the last several years. So South Pine Creek will be staffed, Sasco will be staffed, Lake Mohegan, Penfield Jennings, etc., at the levels that they had been staffed at. So there's no change to that. The one thing that I do keep an eye on is the overtime. We're not going for overtime. So my guys know that, and that's how we schedule.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Lopez.
Hi, Erin Lopez, District 2. Hi. I just had, the sinking fund thing is new to me, so if you could just clarify for me, so you're starting with $25,000 this year. If you don't use that, would you be adding $25,000 next year? Is that how it was explained to you, or is it stay at that level?
It was not explained by the Board of Finance to me that they would add $25,000 every year.
Okay.
So it may just stay at that level. I wouldn't anticipate that it would stay. I think that they would say, if you're going to raise rates or do something, then whatever that increase is going to get dropped into that sinking fund. But it also may depend on how much, if we spent that whole $25,000, they may say, well, we've got to replenish it. So.
Okay, so you expect it to work a little bit like the I think you call it the revolving fund.
The revolving fund. That's my anticipation, okay. But I will follow up with our finance department just to make sure that that's their understanding.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, I will gladly send the email saying, hey, I messed that one up.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Representative Lefkowitz.
Hello, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. I'd like to ask you the same question I asked of the Human Services Department, and that is what your biggest challenge was in putting together the budget for this specifically for Waterfront and Marina.
Oh, really, it's just balancing the needs and the wants and making those tough decisions. You know, would I like to have more hours at the lockers? That would be fantastic. If we can open the lockers up at 8 o'clock in the morning when the moms are getting here for 8, that would be great. But with that, I'd probably have to add parking attendants because then we would have people wanting to come park here, and we'd want to make sure, well, we can't have we want those people to be captured in that revenue. So it's just balancing the needs and the wants, essentially.
Thank you.
Representative McDermott.
Mark McDermott, District 7. Anthony, you said before with this sinking fund, if we needed to replace a dock or something like that, how do we do that today?
$25,000, right?
Well, docks are expensive. I worked in marine construction in college,
Exactly.
trust me. Where does the money come from now? Out of your revenue?
No, as of right now, if we were to do a project like that, it would come out of DPW's budget, I believe.
Lucky you, Joe. Beautiful. Okay, thank you.
Representative Pistilli. You're okay. Representative Vergara, I had next.
Jill Vergara, District 7. So I was watching a Park and Rec meeting where I thought it was said that our beaches are valued at something like $25 million. Does that sound right?
I don't know if they were speaking about the beaches, but I know that there was a number that was talked about for the marina.
Oh, it was just for the
tax
marina?
property. If that was to be outsourced and we were to sell
really,
that property, it was something along those lines.
It was
I believe
a
it was just
really
marina
high
they
number.
were talking about.
Okay. It just sounded like it was a high number, and if that represented the value for our waterfront, it's probably one of our most valuable assets. Do you think that we're putting enough money into maintenance of that asset?
That's a good question. I think our maintenance is on par with where it should be. I mean, if we threw more resources at it, could it be better? Sure, I think so. But it's funny because the feedback that I get from non-residents, Westport residents, Norwalk residents, your beaches are nicer than Campo. Occasionally I'll get the Fairfield resident that'll say, oh, your beaches are nothing compared to Campo. But, you know, I've had people say, well, we groom our beaches three times a week. Campo does it once. Does it mean ours are better maintained? No, not necessarily. But I think our beaches are on par, and I agree that they are one of our largest assets here in town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Gerber.
Mr. Calabrese, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
I feel like it's always nice to see you. Bill Gerber, District 2. We've all received a number of emails from constituents, not in my district, but mainly voters, calling, you know, the marina the piggy bank of the town, and you know, you've seen all of those. Now, so I'd like to sort of just take a minute to sort of flesh that out a little bit. There is a proposal that's going to be put in front of us in the not too distant future about the cost of a renovation of the marina, right?
So I wouldn't call it a proposal. There is a plan. When the subcommittee started to explore this option of our marina and what can we do, they gave us at first 10 options. The guidance that they were given was show us what a marina is supposed to look like. If you were starting from day one, show us what that marina is supposed to look like. So there were 10 different options, and they ranged from basically replacing what you had in kind and going to a complete remodel and basically, you know, cutting the marina in half and saying, well, these are what your fairways should be, these are the size boats you should have in here, etc. The commission continued to hammer those plans out and figure out, okay, well, what can we do with these that's going to cause the least amount of disruption? They went back to the consultants. They came up with an option 11 and actually an 11A. The commission felt that this option 11 was the happy medium, the best compromise that we were going to get, what was safe, best for the marina, you know, best for the town of Fairfield and our voters. So that's what they're holding their public. I don't want to call it a public hearing because it's more of an info session or an info gathering session with the voters, where they'll get that. They're going to show the plans and then basically get all the feedback from those voters again. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you like to see? All those types of things. But it's not a proposal.
Right. With that initial draft, did it have a preliminary dollar number affixed to it?
We did ask, you know, again, these are not, it's more back of the napkin, maybe a little better than back of the napkin, but initially...
Which means it'll go up.
Yeah, it always does, right? Initially $7 million for that plan, not counting water, plumbing, and all that. So if you add a...
And dredging, does that include dredging?
Not include the dredging. Dredging's a separate project that's been approved already.
Right. Does dredging have a dollar number affixed to it?
The town approved $700,000 in 17.
Okay, so we've got a preliminary 7, so let's call it 9, 10 maybe, plus a 700,000 for dredging. So what I think it would be helpful at some point, because we kind of sort of had the same types of emails with Smith Richardson. You know, we're the piggy bank of the town. We provide 200,000, and then boom, we've got a $7-8 million project. Yep. No, you're actually not the piggy bank of the town. It's an incredibly important asset, but it's just the cyclical nature of these big capital projects where you're giving and then all of a sudden you're spending more than you gave. So, you know, I think we need to all get on the same page in terms of the finances of some of these really intensive capital, sort of cyclical, you know, things like the marina, so that I think there's some distrust of kind of feel of the voters that we're throwing off all this money and you want to raise our rates. Well, they're probably going to end up costing other taxpayers a fair amount of money, it sounds like, so, which I don't mind, actually. I think it's a great asset. So I think, but at least the numbers need to be on a piece of paper so that we can all sort of agree that they are not the piggy bank of the town.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I think you're spot on, and I know the committee's been looking for guidance from boards like these when we come before you and present these plans. Tell us how you guys want us to pay for it, right? When we went to the Board of Finance, tell us how you want us to pay for it. If you want the voter, if this project's going to cost $8 million and you want the voters to own that, well, we've done the numbers, again, back of the napkin. It's going to be X amount of an increase, which, is that reasonable? Maybe not. Is it palatable for the town to do that? Again, probably not. But will the town bond half of it and then the other half's going to go on the voters? Again, that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for from...
Absolutely. I mean, and some of it is form over substance. The form being, someone's looking in the face and saying, "You're ripping us off. You need to give us this," and then I'll say, "No, we're not." And it kind of gets into some real back and forth and nasty feelings where it's more like, we know it's a huge asset for the town and we should fund it, but don't, act that way, kind of.
Representative McDermott.
Mark McDermott, District 7. Just to have a follow-up, I'm having a sinking feeling right now. You have a line item here as far as maintenance, buildings and grounds. It's $15,000, and then equipment as well, $2,000. So that's $17,000, right? What does that actually cover?
Yeah, it doesn't actually go. Sometimes it goes towards the marina. Other times it's lifeguard chairs, it's boat racks, it's things of that nature. It's a little of everything when it comes to waterfront.
Okay. So I was at the marina today, and Mr. Michelangelo's guys were down there putting in these new frog hooks, the safer ones, which is a good thing. So basically, is what you're telling me, we don't really know the true cost here because all this repair work is going into his budget.
Correct. So what the marina, and this is the talk that we're having right now internally, this is how the budgets have been set up for as long as I can remember, with my 5 budgets like this. But the marina budget consists of, I take the revenue, Joe handles...
That's good, that's a good deal.
It's a good deal, right? I get the revenue.
I wish I had that deal.
Joe takes the expense, and the police department shares that expense with the security. So, because the Board of Finance was talking about security being cut, well, that actually comes out of the police budget.
So do we know actually what it's costing?
We do.
The DPW and the police department?
We have a very good estimate on that, yes.
And that is what?
Well, off the top of my head, we net around $350,000 for the marina. So that's the number that the voters keep throwing out, saying that they're the piggy bank. Well, you're netting $350,000, they're not seeing anything going back in, which is not necessarily true. But that's where it is. So my goal, and again, those internal talks that we're having right now, is maybe for next year's budget, before we come back through this, is to get a separate one just called Marina, and we carve out those numbers from those departments, and we throw it in under one of us. One of us would then have all of that. That's the internal talk. So.
Okay.
Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. You manage a lot of fantastic assets to the town as Park and Rec. Do you budget and view all of these assets equally? As a resident who doesn't own a boat, I can't use the marina. I just, even if I wanted to, I couldn't. I can always use the beach. I can pick up golf clubs. I can start doing that. There are a lot of, I can go to Lake Mohegan. There are a lot of, most of the other assets to the town can be tapped by any resident. So I was just wondering, money in, money out. I like the idea of including costs in a marina sheet so that people know that, this is what it's cost and this is the you know, the value that those specific people are uniformly and uniquely getting. So do you manage those and reflect that in your budget, the various
I would say
views?
I would say I prioritize on things that need a little more tender love and care.
And provide uniform or equal access?
Well, the equal access part is a little tougher, right? Because we only have X amount of slips in the marina. So if we have 574 slips, there's only 574 people that could put a boat in one of those slips. You know, you couldn't just show up tomorrow, dump your boat in and take one of the slips. But, you know, you as a resident, me as a resident, I could buy my beach sticker and I can go down to the marina and I could have lunch. So I could still use the facility. I couldn't put my boat in a slip. I could trailer my boat. I could dump my boat in the water at the marina, drive it out into the sound, come on back, trailer it back home. So I still have access as a resident to do that, but I wouldn't have access as a slip.
No, it's just managing assets.
Yeah.
And you do take
Yes.
that into consideration.
Yes.
And into your budget.
I believe so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions on Waterfront? Further questions on Waterfront and Marina? I'm sorry.
Thank you. Regarding the dredging, is the DPW involved in that? I mean, it is a safety.
DPW handles this entirely.
Okay. Good. No offense to you, obviously.
None taken.
You're
None
busy
taken.
reffing, I know.
Thank you, Greg.
Further questions? Seeing none, we have the Carl Dickman Golf Course, page 250. Questions on the par 3? Seeing none, we also have the H. Smith Richardson Golf Course, page 253. Questions on the golf course? Everyone's a little tired of golf, I guess. So, seeing none, now I can
I
excuse
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we have the Board of Ed. Good evening.
Hi.
So we'll open up to questions unless there's any update or anything else you want to give us before we open it up to questions.
Hi, Tony Jones, School Superintendent. It's like 1, 2, 3. Where is it? Getting closer. Tony Jones, School Superintendent. We do not have any updates since the Board of Finance meeting.
Okay. Questions for the Board of Ed? Representative Walk.
There we go. Jay Walk, District 5. First of all, thank you very much for everything that you guys do for us, for our children. My question is, so this cut of $700,000 to the Board of Ed, what does it mean as far as, can you survive it? Can we survive that cut? What does it mean to the schools, to the children? What are they not going to get from not getting this money? Or, I mean, if you had the $700,000, what would it go to? That's my question. Thank you.
Christine Vitale, Chair of the Board of Education. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a detailed answer to that question right now. After this body votes, we'll see where the budget comes in at that time. We will ask Dr. Jones and staff to give us a recommendation for where she thinks the best place for that money to come from. And at that time, it'll come before the board. We'll sit down, we'll take her recommendations under consideration and have the discussion. We will try to do our best to keep it out of directly the classroom, but saying that, we have maintenance needs that are also, less glamorous, but that need to be done. So that will be taken into consideration also.
Cuts to staff? Would it mean cuts to staff?
No,
Money?
no,
Okay.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying anything in terms of cuts.
Okay.
I'm
glad to hear that. Thank you.
trying to keep it as far away from direct instruction and what happens day to day in the classroom as possible. But as I said, we're going to have to wait to see where the budget comes in at the end, where we would spend it at. It's in the budget before you right now.
Representative Herron?
Doreen Herron, District 9. I had a few questions, so I'm happy to break it up just a few. My first question had to do with the capital outlay, the refresh of computer hardware, the $103,000 for Chromebooks Touch at the elementary schools. And my question was, is this allotment a typical, the annual refresh for what elementary would receive, or is it additional Chromebooks, and why Chromebooks, and how will they be allocated to the elementary school level?
Hi, I'm Nancy Burns. I'm the Director of Technology for the district. The proposal is actually focused on our K-2 children. Touch is something they're very accustomed to. Anybody who's looked in a restaurant and watched kids, they're all on somebody's cell phone or iPad. And we're finding that it's so difficult for them to log into a device that using the touch-enabled device will allow them to get into those resources that we provide to them that are online. That's everything from emerging readers to interactive math programs to just about everything you can imagine.
So it would be in addition to the hardware that we use for testing, like the carts that already exist at the elementary schools?
Yes, exactly. It's a cart of 30 for each of the 11 elementary schools. That's the intent, with the focus being on the K-2 children. But of course, it can be used across the building for whatever the need may be.
And do you see that increasing just because how it went from the high schoolers to middle school and now we're doing is there an intent to go for Chromebooks for every grade?
We're actually evaluating the need based on whatever the instruction is or the curriculum. There are some things that Chromebooks can't do. There are certain Adobe digital photography programs that are difficult to do using a Chromebook. You really need, I'll call it, because I can date myself this way, an old-fashioned Windows machine that has an installed program on it. So there's some sophisticated things that can't be done that way. I would say across the board, across the country, most educational institutions, and ours is one of them, are looking at online and open educational resources to reduce overall costs and keep our information that we're sharing with our children current. There's a whole federal government initiative along that line. Connecticut adopted it at the higher ed level first, and we're waiting for that to sort of trickle down. But in the meantime, most of our resources now, other than some traditional textbooks and those things that can't be done online, are through online terminals. Chromebooks being one of them.
Thank you. And I can defer if there's other technology questions or to go.
It's fine. Representative McDermott, I think I had you next.
Mark McDermott, District 7. I think I just turned my... No, I didn't. Okay. I had a question. Last year, I believe, it was Ms. Deasy, right, that talked about shortage of teachers in certain teaching professions like, I think it was physics and science and maybe special ed as well. Is that still the case? And when we do have to replace teachers or hire new teachers, are we having to hire them at a higher salary or a higher level than what they would normally come in as?
I might just add before she talks about the shortage area on the financial aspect, that was part of the challenge that we had this year is the way that we've traditionally budgeted. We were bringing in teachers at a higher level than we have seen in the past, which is a good problem to have, but it did impact our current budget this year.
And are these teachers, even if you're bringing them in at a higher level, are they seasoned, or could they be like a 2-year special ed teacher and they're going to get a nice hit because there's just not so many of them?
No, if we're bringing in people who are we're paying more than we had necessarily budgeted for. We're not paying more than they deserve. There's real emphasis on making sure that what we are offering people is reflective of their experience. But with that said, we are bringing in more experienced people. And the other thing to keep in mind is that when we have half steps or step freezes in a contract, you have people who've been in Fairfield for 10 years and might not be on step 10. So they might be on step 5 or 6. But if they're coming in from another district and they have 10 years experience, we would put them closer to a step 10 because that's what they're going to negotiate when they come in.
Thank you.
Further questions, Representative Georgiadis?
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Hi, Dr. How are you? Good luck in your new job. My question is back to technology. This is to deal with content. So from a budget standpoint, as you move to the Chromebook, will the expense of content be greater every year because you won't, I know when my kids were in school, the books looked like they were on year 5 or whatever, and I know the content changes rapidly, and in a digital universe that, maybe the temptation is to update your content every year, and what's the cost associated with that?
We actually would expect to see cost savings over time. Because when you think about something, I'll just use calculus textbook. One textbook is $230. And when you do that across all content areas and all of your secondary sections and classes, and it's static because, for instance, U.S. history, if we get a history book, we have the same history 3 years later that we had 3 years ago. So what is happening is the teachers are really preferring to have real-time content that is up to date, and so much of that now, which Ms. Burns mentioned, is open source, which means it's free, and it's produced by places like MIT and Johns Hopkins, and tremendous, tremendous resources that are available to us now that weren't available even 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago.
So while the Chromebook is a cost, the content can potentially offset some of that cost.
It definitely can offset some of that cost. It also has, over time, because this is the first really year for us with a big implementation, we would also expect to see things like copying going down. We have purchases like Scantrons when you're giving assessments in high school. As you move those assessments more online, all those expenses go away. So the device itself, if you'll notice in the capital budget, the capital's even going down because the device itself is so cost effective.
And that's good for the environment. No copying.
It's great, and it takes a while to get there, because like with anybody who's learning technology, we have some teachers who it comes very naturally for, and some it's a growth curve, and it takes a while for people to be more comfortable moving to paperless, but that's what we're seeing happening in education.
Okay, that's great news. Thank you.
Further questions, Representative Lopez?
Hi, Erin Lopez, District 2. I'm going to stay on the Chromebook thing for a second. So this is the first year where you've really rolled out. I have a 7th grader, so she has the Chromebook. And I guess my question is, have you had any unexpected expenses with giving 800 kids a Chromebook to take back and forth to school every day and make sure it's charged? We've gotten several emails, make sure it's charged. Have you had any unexpected expenses for loss or damage or anything like that?
Our loss rate's actually been right where we expected, if not lower, really. When it comes to charging, that has more to do with children being ready for class than it does about a cost or an expense. And that's just, again, students learning a new skill that you have to go home every evening, plug it in, charge it, and you have to get that routine. Okay. But it's not expense related in that regard.
And then, so I'm not sure if I understand entirely. So the 7th grade got it this year. Are we returning at the end of the year? And then 8th grade, and how is the rollout going with the number that you're buying every year now?
The plan is to collect them from the 12th graders that are graduating and for any student who is leaving the district. The students are going to be allowed to take them home over the summer or keep them. We'll check them back in at the end of the year and again in the fall to make sure that they're in good order and ready to go. The overall plan is to let the 7th graders take them therefore to 8th grade and then give the next round of Chromebooks to 6th and 7th. So we'll be covered from 6th through 12th grade.
And does that affect insurance when you're having these kids if they're not school controlled during like the summer period?
They're still school controlled. All the devices are managed by the district, and we actually have them connecting through the school network, even though they may be using your home ISP.
Okay.
So they're still under our control. We can still find out where they're at. We can still manage and filter them.
And then, so say my daughter brings it home, you know, I know that it's very restricted and what they can do on it. What if something happens to it over the summer? Am I liable to replace this when she comes back to school? Like, how does that part of it work, the liability?
All that information will be communicated to parents at the end of the school year. We're working on those policies now.
Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garstock, just District 5. I'm having trouble finding it right now in the budget book. Can you help me? What is the unit cost of the Chromebooks?
Dr. Jones is going to look it up for me. It's $2.25. That includes the
Okay.
Chrome license.
And what is the expected life?
We expect 4 years. The way Chrome works is a little different than a Windows device.
Yeah.
The operating system automatically updates, and they continually tell you how long it'll last. The current ones we just bought this past year are good through, I believe it's 2023, if I remember correctly.
And how many are getting turned in for repairs mid-year?
We had a very slow return rate. A lot of the stuff we do is handled by technicians at the buildings. Even some of the librarians and their paraprofessionals can fix something. The common thing we found are children downloading things that are called extensions, which is like a software application that somehow disables a piece of the Chromebook, like the keyboard or the scrolling mechanism. So we uninstall that for the students, and then they work fine. We had a number of broken screens, things like they had a pencil on the keyboard, they shut the screen down and broke. But we've been able to find a very cost-effective way of repairing those. And we do all of our repairs in-house that are out of warranty, so that's also helped us.
Are you happy with them?
Yes, I would say overall we're very happy with them.
The reason I ask is, having used them, my sons both have them, and we do not find them very useful. I understand and respect all the advantages you were just describing and totally get that, but they're pretty low quality machines, I have to say. They're quite problematic, quite quirky, and often my kids wind up using one of our home computers because they're very difficult and problematic.
Well, I'd love to talk to you about your personal experience with them.
Yeah, let's do that.
I would say overall, and I talk to the other districts across the state on a daily basis, and my counterparts and I think HP, the version we have, is in about 80% of the districts. So the overall feeling is that compared to the other Chromebooks that are out there and available to us at that price point and that are designed for education, so they're a little hardened. It's a good value for what we're getting. On the other hand, Chrome isn't perfect.
I think that's probably the bigger issue.
Yes, and there are, like I said earlier, there are so many things that a Chromebook cannot do, and that's the other part of what we've been analyzing is, especially at the high school level, what courses are children taking that the Chromebook really isn't going to be the answer for them, and how do we augment what we're offering to take care of that?
Let's talk more offline. Thank you.
Representative Herron.
I just wanted to switch it up from technology, if that's okay. This one had to do with the increase in staffing for the year, the 10.9 additional FTEs, and that 6.9 of those were special ed. 4.7 FTEs were paraprofessionals. And I'm just curious if, and I might not be recalling this correctly, but with the prior superintendent, we moved to a model where we were paying for more certified staff in special ed, and we decreased our paras. I don't know a number, but more of the model. And I don't know if going forward that with the increase in like the students' learning and social emotional need, if we need to budget more for paras that we need throughout the year. And has that been talked about, that for us to have gone 4.7 FTE paraprofessionals, are we allotting that properly for the upcoming budget?
Yeah, that's a very complex question because it's all based on student need. And so every year we can have one student who moves into the district who has a para in their IEP for a one-on-one, and we must, by law, we're obligated to hire that para. So we look at the end of every year if we have students who are graduating, students who are moving that have been accessing a para, and then we move those paras to other buildings and other sites. That's ongoing, literally, I would say on a weekly basis, and especially in an area like ECC where we enroll all year long.
So I guess to Mr. Mancusi, do you think that we're prepared for the upcoming year, though, that you have the paraprofessionals that you need for the students that have that need throughout the year that might not be coming in with a para?
What I will say about para support, it's been an ongoing conversation we've had throughout the district this year. We've completed our special education audit. We believe that students are better served by certified staff versus non-certified staff. Obviously, paras and ed trainers are needed for students who require additional adult support. We are constantly looking at how to best utilize our staff for the benefit of our students. This year, in the proposed budget, we do believe that we have allocated enough paraprofessional support and ed trainer support to support the needs of our students. We're looking at developing independence plans for students who currently have special education support. We're currently looking at, like, our most severe students with disabilities, working in dyads or triads when appropriate to expand their access to other children so they're not always in a one-to-one situation. That is appropriate in some cases, but not in all cases. But it is, it is definitely a weekly conversation that I have with my department when we look at staffing across the district.
Thank you. I just have one other question.
That's fine.
It was regarding the ELL Academy initiative that was in the budget as an initiative last year, and I don't think that came to fruition. Was there an amount that was put into the budget for this year that wasn't used, and was it carried over, or can you let us know what model we're using now with ELL?
As far as the model, we did add additional staff at Ward, which is where the academy was originally supposed to be based. What happened at the elementary level was it had to do with the number of EL students. We didn't see the growth this year that we had seen over the last couple of years with EL. We were almost flat, which was a good thing for us, but we were anticipating more students. So, do you have the positions there? Yeah. The 3.0 is what we had in paraprofessional staff, and that was most of it went to the high school at Ward.
So am I summarizing correctly that we use those FTEs, but
for EL,
not in an academy setting, but over
well, it really is in an academy setting in that the way that we structured Ward this year was very different. What we thought we would have were students at Ludlow coming across to Ward. We didn't have the numbers at Ludlow. They weren't there.
I guess it was my interpretation that it was also at the elementary level that we were intending to do it.
Yes, and that's at the elementary we've stayed relatively flat, and again, most of our numbers, the vast majority were at one building.
So those funds aren't, because when it was a new initiative, I know there was a dollar amount associated with the increase in the budget. Is that being carried over when we didn't do the academy?
We did do, what I'm saying is we did do it. When we say an academy, what we meant by that, when we were talking about that last year, is you have one school site, and then it's kind of like our CLC model. They're not in every school, you have one school site, and then you're transporting kids across to be able to get the services.
So we did do that.
We have not had to transport students because they weren't in those other school sites, but they were in the school sites where we saw larger numbers. And it's so with the staffing was utilized.
So for the upcoming year, if you saw of that need, we would be transporting them?
If we had students who were at another school, and I'll use Ludlow as an example for the high school, and we had 3 students move in who had absolutely no skill set as far as learning English, they were beginning learners, we could actually utilize that same model and send them to Ward where the services have been increased for our EL students.
And is that a case-by-case basis, or is that just what we would do?
It is a case-by-case basis, and one of the things that we are doing is making sure as we enroll students that we're actually assessing them so that we have a better idea if they're an EL student, what level they're actually coming in with their English, and that's new for us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Iacono, did you still have something?
Yes, thank you.
Didn't this work?
Nope. Here we go. Pam Iacono, District 8. Thank you. I want to follow up on the Chromebooks and the technology conversation.
Is it the intent of the board or of administration that the Chromebooks become the property of the students?
That has never been part of the discussion. That actually, by law would take a totally different process because you would be taking public funds and actually passing those off to students. So that has never been the intent.
Okay. I'm very concerned about the decision that has been made now administratively to let these children bring the Chromebooks home over the summer. To me, as an RTM member, as someone who's trying to manage town dollars, that is an asset that belongs to the town. You have absolutely no idea if anyone's going to move over the summer, where they're going to go, what vacations they're taking, if they're going on the beach. This is school property. To me, it's like a textbook. You collect that at the end of the year. I personally am totally not in favor of that at all. So just putting that out there.
If I could actually just address that, part of that is the planning that we're doing right now is just figuring out what that is going to look like over the summer. And we have an expectation, and as a 21st century school district, that our learning continues through the summer, especially in our high school. And you're going to see that continue to grow. And if you look at districts that are, have been integrating for 5 and 10 years, their summer programs are robust in the number of students who are accessing learning. And I mean, that's where I think the district will be headed. But certainly if a parent was going to, overseas and they didn't want it, then that would be part of that decision making in the summer.
Well, I think then that you need to do a very thorough job of tying that into summer curriculum. For example, you have voluntary math packets that I know in our house we gave up doing years ago because no one checked them, and quite frankly, it was a giant joke. But if you have the Chromebook and you're going to utilize that and require, if there's going to be work requirements behind it, then yeah, then I could support tax dollars, into checking out assets over the summer. But if you're not going to tie that into curriculum, I see that as a potential problem and an affront to taxpayers.
I think we would agree with you on that. We would not want them just going home and going to the beach and not being utilized for the proper purpose.
Thank you. That would alleviate a huge concern of mine. The second thing that I am wondering, do you have in your budget monitoring systems for when these Chromebooks are in use in school, in the classroom?
We do. And I will say one of the discussions that literally within the last 2 weeks that I think somebody asked about what one of the surprises was, we have monitoring software for not only where the sites kids are going to, but being able to monitor Google Drives. And one of the pieces that from the senior leadership team we've been talking about is how it's really helping us with social emotional learning because the students know that they're monitored. I mean, they realize that. And we're having students who are in crisis on a Saturday sitting in the town library that might be typing a suicide note, and we pick those up instantly. There's a team of 4 people in the district that get called 24 hours a day. There's 4 of us. They work through the line so that if we need to go into crisis mode, we can call the parent. We could call the police if needed to do a home check. So the monitoring is very in-depth.
Great. And so if they're, for example, that's fantastic to hear. If children are in the classroom learning and they have their Chromebooks open and a student decides that they are going to access a game, will a teacher know that they are playing that game?
That's kind of a complex question. Could we look and see if a student was playing a game? If a teacher is teaching and they're moving around the classroom, part of that is classroom management. So, they want to be able to have the screens visible. So we wouldn't want a teacher just sitting at their desk on a monitoring program because 10 years ago or 15 years ago, people would do that when technology was first coming out in schools, but that's not where we are anymore.
Well, there's a system, Nancy's probably familiar with it, called Casper that would let you know if that stuff is going on in your classroom, that I would imagine does not take away from teachers being able to walk around and look at screens.
I'm very familiar with different brands and 2 different systems. I've utilized that software. We've trialed it, and in both of the previous systems, the districts got rid of it because when the teachers realize also the liability for what could be on a screen that should belong to the district level. And I'm going to use something like suicide that could be happening in a classroom. The student goes to the restroom, the teacher didn't catch that monitoring, the expectation was they're supposed to be monitoring. There's a lot of legal ramifications that come with that responsibility, and we do that at the district level. But if classrooms are engaging and teachers are utilizing technology when it's appropriate, and I think if you could see anything in our district this year, I would ask you to really look at what's happening in our STEAM program. Very, very seldom are our kids actually on devices and technology. It's really about hands-on, integrated, innovative learning, and that's what we really want pre-K through 12.
Thank you. I have a 7th grader. I've heard some stories, but I take them with a grain of salt because they're coming from a 7th grader. Also, you know, you're faced now with the budget challenge of reducing your budget by $700,000. The screen time for children in elementary school, I'm just a little disturbed that we're moving to more, you know, you're excited about a digital process, but I'm worried about kids being on screens all the time. So you know, from a budgeting standpoint, I don't want to see maintenance cut. I would love for the Board of Ed to re-examine whether or not kindergartners should be on these screens for all of this time, and when you're looking at making budget reductions, you know, to take that into consideration.
Well, and I think it's one of those things where you know, you kind of, and I agree with you on screen time, and I think all of us do that are part of our team, and that's why STEAM is the way that it is. We are very committed to hands-on learning and not having kids on screens all day, and it's finding the balance in when we need to utilize technology, and it needs to be in the budget, and it needs to be in elementary, because if you have not if you've not had an opportunity to see how our children are actually assessed, most parents do not realize that this is no longer, it used to be pen and paper, and then it went to like ABC, just your choices online. It is not like that anymore. And it is cruel to take a 3rd grader and have them go assess for an hour or longer, and they don't know how to navigate the machine. Not only is it stressful to test, but now you've added a whole nother skill set that we haven't taught them. So teachers, and luckily, we have some of the best teachers in the country in Fairfield. And you know, we have to be able to trust our K1 and 2 teachers. They are not going to sit our children behind screens all day, and they don't. As a matter of fact, when I'm out in buildings, and I'm generally out Mondays and Fridays, very seldom do I see technology used in K1, 2. They really use it when it's appropriate.
All right, well, that's good to know. And then the last thing I had is the Math Academy. What's the budget line for that? And how many students?
I know it's less than 20. We think it's 10.
And how many students does that accommodate?
It could accommodate just one classroom.
All right, that would be another thing where we would be servicing such a small amount of people, and given all the budget constraints, I don't know that this would be the time to move forward with that initiative, but that's just my perspective.
Thank you.
Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. Thank you, Representative Iacono, for raising the maintenance, because that's a good jumping off point. That's what I wanted to discuss, and I agree with you. I feel like that should be prioritized. And I was really happy to see that funds were added back into maintenance this year, and I want to applaud you for that. I think that our school campuses are really important assets to the town, and maintaining them properly saves us money in the long term. So I think it's really important to put the money into the maintenance of those school buildings. I wanted to ask you specific questions from the budget book, page 25. It's your executive summary. In column 4, for operations and maintenance of buildings, I think it states that $204,000 was not put into maintenance this year that had been budgeted for maintenance. The budget versus actual. If so, why? Because I feel like there are quite a few maintenance projects that have lingered in several of our schools, and I would have appreciated using that money for maintenance this year. It's on page 25, the executive summary for the operations and maintenance of buildings, column 4. It says 2018 to 2019 budget versus actual.
I believe that's savings and technology that happens to be in maintenance category.
Oh, it's in the maintenance category. Okay.
Not me.
Okay. And I also wanted to ask you about the percent of the budget, that last column 10.68% of our budget is used towards maintenance, because again, we have 17 separate campuses and we're putting in $11.2 million for maintenance of those 17 campuses. How does this compare to other towns and their investment in their assets?
I don't think that's a question we can answer, because the budgets are very complex, and in every locality, budgets are handled differently. Some of them much more flows through the town than it does through schools, and we're all set up differently.
Okay, to me it's a little concerning. It seems low. And I wanted to skip back to the further in the budget book where there's a list of the maintenance items for the separate schools. Sorry.
154.
Let's see.
And Mr. Collin, if you'd like to come forward.
I have it on 75 to 76. Pages 75 to 76 of the budget book. So it says 313 maintenance services. I see a lot of zeros, and I know some of this is connected to current renovations, but at the same time, and I see zeros in past years, that really concerns me, to see so many buildings not getting maintenance. I just feel like I own a home, and we're not wealthy people by any means, but we put money into checking our plumbing and heating facilities every year, and we probably spend $500 to $1,000 on that basic maintenance, and I wonder why we're not doing that for every single school facility.
So the pages you're referencing are the individual schools.
Right.
And it identifies, it's like a living document. It's the schools that are getting projects this fiscal year, so it changes every year. So if you go back to page 155 where the full list is, 154, these are plugged into those pages, 75, 76. So we're requesting $474,030 in maintenance projects. Those get filtered into page 75, 76 for each school. And we don't have enough funding to do projects in every single school of the 17 schools. We'd be looking at, $1.5 million, $1.6 million.
It just seems like we're really behind in maintenance projects. I see Sherman set as 0, and since I'm a parent at Sherman, I know what's going on there, and the renovation does not include the library, and the library there are a lot of problems with the library that need to be fixed. The librarian has said that she feels sick in certain areas of the library because it's damp, and I just don't think that it's a good idea to be seeing zeros in any of these schools.
If you look at Sherman, the previous year, though, we did have money in there for a project. So we try and touch as many schools as we can, and we also do non-recurring capital. We have a priority list for all of the maintenance projects. We prioritize them 1, 2s, and 3s. We try and get all of the ones into the budget. They generally get cut a little bit, and we do try to touch as many schools as we can, and safety and security issues around the students and the staff.
Has any thought been given to dehumidification for schools that don't have AC? I know that Dwight has some, but it seems like it's a district-wide issue that maybe all the schools should get those dehumidifiers.
Very good question. The newer mechanical means of fresh air and air conditioning systems do have dehumidification capability. So we are looking at that anytime we do a bigger renovation and addition for a school. The district's also looking at, there's a line item in our budget for 1920 to hire a professional to come in and help us look at every school to see what we would need to include mechanical means of fresh air and air conditioning with dehumidification for each and every school, and give us a long-term plan to work with that.
I'm just not sure that it's cost efficient, honestly, to wait that long to a renovation to put these dehumidifiers into the schools. We're really flirting with disaster with mold issues, and we have an example in Westport. I think that this should be a high priority for us.
We watch it very closely, and you should know that we have about 8 schools that are done so far, so it's not all 17.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Pastelli?
Hi, Sharon Pastelli, 3. It's not working. What? Oh, it is. Thanks. Whose computer is interfering with me? I have to ask if we can go back to technology. So in last year's budget book, when I searched on it, I didn't remember seeing the word Chromebook in it last year. And so my recollection could be
You want this one?
Yeah. So last year, I thought that the technology that we were going to purchase was going to be Chromebooks on carts in science. And then, not that long after we voted on the budget, I learned that everybody in the schools, including my own children, were getting Chromebooks. And so I was a little concerned about how long we knew about that project and how come we weren't told about it. And then related to that, I'd like to know what companies we engage in professional services contracts with regarding these Chromebooks, who has access to our kids' data, because there are microphones and cameras on these things, and it does directly tie back to the budget because it's a risk management issue. And the other additional thing is in terms of a data privacy policy, which is also risk management. I know of at least one student in our school system who is a citizen of the EU, and the EU is subject to stricter data privacy laws than US citizens. And so I don't know that we've ever, I'd like to know who we have the contract with, what the data privacy protections are for our students, and what the risk is for the town and the school system. You know, as Representative Iacono said, these things are going home for the summer. They have to be monitored. What's our exposure? So is there a checks and balances in terms of the ROI on not making copies? I see we're minus $400,000 on textbooks and supplies, and we're plus about $400,000 for purchasing the Chromebooks for the elementary schools, right? So that purchase kind of offsets each other. Did I misunderstand? I've tried to connect the dots throughout the book. So we're saving on supplies, and what do we expect that savings to be going forward? What do we expect the savings to be as a result of buying the Chromebooks in future budgets? And then what the offset is in terms of our risk and our professional services costs, and what the analysis of that entire ball of wax has been.
I'm not sure which question you want me to start with, but as far as the ROI is concerned, what we saw last year, what you're seeing this year is the initial investment covering grades 6 to 12. We won't be seeing those large numbers going forward for a few years because we expect, as I said earlier, to get about a 4-year lifespan out of these devices. Obviously, we'll be buying extras for breakage, extras for additional student enrollments as the number of kids vacillates between grade levels. We may also, depending on what kind of individual programs we implement, we may need to buy a few to take care of, I don't know, like the math workshop. But it may not be a Chromebook, it may be some other device that we decide is necessary. So we'll see the capital investment go down, which is what you see in your budget book. I mean, It's a little bit of a misnomer because last year the Board of Ed decided to give me $400,000 in the prior year's budget so they could take $400,000 out of the capital line and put it back in school supplies. So if you look year over year, it's almost a wash. I think it's $1 million for each year. We're actually down slightly this year. Yeah. Going to the privacy situation, I am the district privacy guru. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
What?
We can't hear you.
I'll put your hand over it.
Related to that, so so it was the capital expenditure was carried forward from the prior year, but that we would be purchasing the Chromebooks.
The Chromebooks were definitely in the budget. We did modify the plan a bit because what happened was really probably almost on top of the final RTM vote on the budget. Our original plan when we started doing the numbers and getting ready to order them earlier because of the $400,000 transfer, we discovered that we were so close to covering every student in the high schools that we thought it would be wasteful to buy the roving carts that we would have to secure them in. So I did a quick number analysis, and we actually saved close to $85,000 by not buying the carts. So I met with the two headmasters. We talked for about an hour and a half on the pros and cons, our concerns about the teachers being prepared, and how we would handle it. And as to quote one of them, I won't tell you which one, we decided to rip the Band-Aid off and do it. And I think overall, we're very pleased with the way the program has gone. I think it was, go ahead.
Yeah, and I might add, it was and the decision is on me in that when they came to me at the very end of the year, it was a more cost-effective solution. It actually saved money for the district to go in this direction. And the teachers felt like, as they really, last year was very much a learning curve year. They knew we were going to be implementing. We were looking to get more technology. So by the end of the year, they knew those big old carts that they'd been hauling around, number one, were hard to haul around our buildings. And they also take up a tremendous amount of space. Our classrooms are not large. So with some of our class sizes, if you get 27 students, big kids, and you also have the carts, they didn't have the space. And I'll just address the risk management side. That's part of just being a school district, and I really, from a risk management, feel much better about a Chromebook than I do when I walk through wood shop and see saws and automotive with large cars and students working underneath them. And I mean, it's part of being a school system, and we have to make sure that safety mechanisms are in place for everything that we do, and that goes back to that whole monitoring system that I was talking about. All of that is in place so that we can do the very best job that we can to make sure that risk management is minimized.
And related to that, thank you for the response on the carts and the cost effective. So I'm glad to have that information. I think it was a great idea. So in terms of data management and data privacy, is anybody making money off the data of what our kids do?
There are actually 3 public acts that the state legislature has passed. I can remember the numbers. PA 16189, PA 17200, and 18 dash I can't tell you. But all of them deal with securing students' data privacy. I'd like to give a shout out to Ms. Jacobson because she was one of the spearheading parents in getting that legislation passed. We've worked very diligently over the past 3 years to make sure that we have agreements in place for any software application, and you can flavor that any which way you want to look at it, apps as well as extensions and things, that collect student data that's personally identifiable and or collects or stores student-created content. And we have explicit addendums with those companies that say that they can't do certain things, and if there's a breach, you know, we've all heard the breaches, Yahoo, Equifax, whatever, that they have to notify us within a particular period of time. We as a district are also required, if we are notified about such a breach, to notify the parents for the children who were involved in that breach. We even go to the point where any of the firms that actually work on our hardware, so in theory they have access to the data even though they probably wouldn't know what to do with it, we have them sign those contracts as well so that they know that they're not allowed to take our data and do anything with it.
So they sign like an NDA, so they can't disclose or take anything that they
No,
find?
there's no advertising ability, there's nothing. The only thing that most of the larger assessment companies, for example, can do
Yeah.
is they can take our data and the results, but
Yeah.
not for the children per se, and do like national statistics off of the results.
In
You know,
aggregate.
what the child's age was, and this is the bell curve for that grade level, that sort
Yep.
of thing.
Like a Pearson?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Representative Lefkowitz.
Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. Just a few comments, a couple of questions. I also share the concern of some of my colleagues about the screen time, and I'm encouraged to hear that you are working closely with your teachers. But in addition to that, I know Detective Irizarry goes into the schools and talks to the parents. It's my opinion that it's happening a little bit too late, and I don't know what the budgetary impact would be, but I really think that those conversations need to be had with our elementary school students, especially seeing that they have the access. So that's just something I hope you'll consider as you're looking at the budget. The second comment is, and I'm not sure what the social emotional impact would be or the budgetary impact, but I wonder, given Representative Garskoff's experience with his kids, and it's not dissimilar from the experience my own kids have had, could there be an opt-out option over the summer, perhaps, certainly, but even during the school year, because I know many kids, and again, I don't know what the social emotional impact would be of some kids choosing it or having to have it, but just something perhaps to look at, because there might be cost savings there. And then third, I wanted to make a comment about the invaluable intangibles that are not reflected in the budget, and to say really thank you. My fifth grader, his teacher left on medical leave very suddenly at the beginning of the school year, and it was a pretty traumatic experience for the fifth graders, and if it weren't for the professionalism and the personal care that the paraprofessional took, the reading specialist, the math specialist, it would have been a disaster. And together with the counseling services, they really turned a bad situation into a manageable one, and I want to thank you for that. And that's not reflected in the dollars and cents here, and those teachers certainly weren't doing it for the money, but for the love, and I wanted to say thank you.
Representative Fogel.
David Fogel, District 1. I have a few budget questions for you. Before I begin, let me preface it by saying I'm a product of public schools myself all the way through. I actually served on my hometown school board many years ago. So this is very important to me, and I value what all of you do, the school board, the administration, the teachers, and the... No, it's back. Okay, good. I want to start off talking about enrollment. Looks like you engaged a third-party firm to study enrollment, Maloney and Macbroom. I'm curious, I mean, how involved are you, I guess the superintendent, in that process, or do they just sort of report back to you?
Each year we get an update, which is based off of our October 1 count, and then they update those projections, and they are looking at the cohort rates and growth over time. They're looking at the history. When we do a large study, which is where the big numbers for the 10-year first come from, they're also looking at the birth rate data, children that are actually born, and so it's very, very detailed information. They provide then those projections to us, and we always know that kindergarten is going to be one of the challenges in your transitional years. You can 6th grade and 9th grade. This year, 9th grade, we retained more of our students than we would have expected, but as a district and a system, they are generally less than 0.5% off. It's a very good number for us to utilize.
So generally they are accurate.
They are very accurate as a system. Where it gets difficult is,
Right.
and definitely on the transitional years.
And so we've used this firm for a number of years, to your knowledge?
Mr. Cullen, how many years? So probably about the last 4.
Okay. And you mentioned some of the factors they take into consideration. Do you know if they take into account or try to project, perhaps population trends due to overall economic conditions in the state or our county, things like that?
You know, as a demographer, the good thing about Malone and McBroom is they do work all across Connecticut. So they do look at trends that are happening, like for instance in Fairfield County, and especially when they do the large studies and they're doing like a 10-year. They're very in depth, and all of that information is coming into their projections.
Okay. And it looks like in the last 8 years or so, roughly, we've lost about 5%, give or take, of our overall student population, right?
We have been declining overall.
Yes. Okay.
It's at different areas. It's declining in elementary, going up in secondary right now.
Correct. Yeah. So it looks like about a 5% drop in the last 8 years. And then it looks like this firm is projecting roughly, again, overall, I agree it varies by segment, but overall another 5% drop in the next 8 years is what I'm seeing in these charts. Is that roughly what you?
Do you have the percentage? Yeah. I don't actually have the percentage right in front of me.
I did the math myself because unfortunately it's not totaled, but I think I'm accurate. So give or take 5%. So, but it sounds like based on your experience, you're pretty confident in those numbers.
I think that the demographers that do this work, school districts rely on them because they are really good at what they do, and it's a very difficult science because it has to do with what makes a family move into a community, what makes a family stay in a community, what makes them choose public school over private school. So they really do study those trends, and I will say that I've never seen the demographer that's going to be 100% every year. It's just impossible.
Right. Okay, related question. The open choice program, do you know to what extent the enrollment projections include open choice, or do they not?
Well, because they're looking at trends, open choice students, the vast majority are already in our district. So they're already once they start with us, we have 85 students. If they started in kindergarten or third grade, they're just part of that cohort growth.
Yes, but to what extent, so the enrollment projections, do they include any assumed increase in open choice?
We don't actually make those decisions until the end of the year, and it's usually such a small group of children that generally know. If we're going to take 10 students, we wouldn't ask them in October because we're not making that decision when we get our update in October that we're going to take 10 students.
Okay, so it's not that there's some significant increase in open choice that's included in the projections. Okay. So just turning to overall cost of the budget. So the gross increase that you asked for was 4.9%, correct?
4.99, yes.
Yeah, just under 5. And then from there, the first selectman proposed a decrease of $700,000. And I'm sorry, I missed it, but what's the percent? So what, after his proposed reduction, what is the percentage increase?
4.59.
5.9, that's right, I saw that, okay. So I'm just curious, I mean, if you see that the projected enrollment is flat, or in this case actually projected to decline, how do you think about costs, not just for this year per se, but over the next 5 to 10 years, when you know that enrollment is expected to decrease? How do you think about what the overall cost should be?
We actually just answered a very detailed question about that for the public today, where we went back to 2011 and looked at current, because we've seen our enrollment shift by, it's about 500 students, yet the differential in cost is minimal. And when I say minimal, it's $19,000. And that's because if we go back to 2011, we had higher enrollment, it was at elementary. And our per cost for an elementary student is significantly less than it is for a high school student. So even though our enrollment's going down, we are not seeing the savings that people would think you would see, because all students are not created equal when it comes to a funding standpoint. High school, you have chemistry labs, very expensive, not only for the safety equipment, for the chemicals. You have an automotive program. You have things like you're a consumer. You have computer graphics where, one computer is far more expensive than any computer you would ever see in an elementary. And right now, that's where it's up. So you're not seeing significant cost savings. You're not going to right now until that shifts again, possibly if enrollment goes down, maybe in the next 10 years, and it shifts back to the elementary level.
Which actually is what these projections are showing, is that the younger children, the number is actually supposed to slightly rise over time, but it's the older children, the medium and older children that are declining pretty significantly. And so the net is a 5% decline over the period. But would you, given what you just said then, would you expect the cost to deliver services per student, the mix, so to speak, to result in lower overall cost?
I think one of the best things would be after this meeting tonight for me to send to RTM some information that looks at it since 2011, because the other components that people forget about are those fixed costs. We're a people business, and the main drivers from 2011 to now are salaries, it's health costs, just like with all of us personally, what we see in our own families. It's those costs that we really don't control, and they're right in par where you would expect them to be. Salaries, if you go back since 2011, we are a bargaining state. We are by law, we have to adhere to that, and it's 2% per year. So if you want to look out 10 years, you can take the history and start applying that, and 2% a year, and go out 10 years, and you're going to see the salary line is going to increase quite a bit. You can do that with utilities. You can do that with insurance, our health insurance. I am sure a decade from now it's not going to cost what it does today. So you can learn from the history, but it doesn't mean that your costs are necessarily going to go down over time.
Right. So if we're at 4.59% now proposed for next year, is it accurate to say 2% of that is a mandatory salary?
Well, out of the 4.99 that we presented, do you by chance have the big chart? Thanks.
It's on the
3.66 was salary and benefits, 0.68 was utility and maintenance, and 0.65 of that entire 4.99 is everything else. It really is instructional.
Right. Okay.
Where's my placement?
And then I guess my last question involves the budget process. I understand that you come up with the budget, goes to the Board of Ed, approved, et cetera. But I'm curious, while you're coming up with the budget, to what extent are you having conversations with the first selectman or others in the administration about, what you might be targeting overall, or do you really just operate independently and then show him or the administration what you're coming up with?
It's definitely not independently. From a school system, number one, when we finish this budget in May, we start working on it in June and July. There's a tremendous amount of effort, and collectively, all of our administrative team, including building level principals, we pretty well zero everything out. And then we look at what is the projection for insurance, what do we project the increase to be, what are the bargaining contracts say for the next year. We start plugging all of those numbers in. We talk about the needs of the district. What does the district improvement plan say we're supposed to be doing? Where are our weaknesses? Where are we not performing as well as we would like programmatically? What is it that we should be doing? And then we build the budget. Generally, when we build it, it's larger than what we would like it to be because we build it on need, but we know that we have to be incredibly respectful in the town, and we want to be. We meet with our board chair, vice chair, secretary, and we talk about this is where the needs are and here's why. These are the drivers, and again, this year, when you look at the drivers, it's hard to argue salaries, utilities, maintenance, and benefits. That is the budget this year. And then, I take guidance from, obviously, my bosses, the Board of Ed, who say we need to ask for what we truly need to maintain the schools, and then bodies such as yourself will decide whether or not that's going to be funded. But we're going to ask for what we need.
Okay, thank you.
And as board chair, I do want to say that that is the way the process went, that the guidance was, and Dr. Jones does meet with the board in October just to hear the board's budget priorities, if there's anything that we are particularly concerned about. And this year, maintenance was a overriding concern of the board based on the problems that we were having in the buildings at the time. It was a very hot and humid summer. We had issues at Dwight. We had issues really at many elementary schools with literally the humidity water seeping up from the floor and down the walls that led to increased costs. And looking at what was happening in Westport, what happened in our own district in McKinley with mold, we really just thought it was our responsibility to increase the maintenance budget, be forthcoming with what the need is, and put it before other town boards.
Thank you.
Representative Walk, I had you next.
Whoa. Jay Walk, District 5. I just want to echo what my colleague, Representative Vergara said about putting in HVACs into our schools. My question is, before I get into that, we're talking about maintenance, and ever since I've come on the RTM, I've advocated always for maintenance and for our schools. So my question is to Mr. Cullen, not to make you get up, Tom. Are we almost caught up? That we're almost there. Are there any more real major projects on some of the school? Roofs, I guess, still have to be done.
No, unfortunately, we didn't even fund all the priority ones in the budget. They totaled, my first draft that I met with the superintendent on totaled $1.6 million. And we got $474,000 into the budget. But we look at the non-recurring account. The town's been very generous in supporting all the non-recurring larger projects. Those are getting done. We look at our long-term plan with the Board of Ed approval on where we want to be with all of the schools in the future. As I just explained, we talked about the air conditioning, mechanical means of fresh air and air conditioning. Now that the schools are buttoned up real tight, new windows, tight security and safety, teachers aren't allowed to just swing their doors open and windows anymore, so we look at all of that.
So we had issues with children because of the heat, going to the nurse's office because of you just can't teach, and teachers can't teach in heat like that.
We had a tough beginning to the school district, definitely. August, September, October, real tough time. We had some real humid weather. We had some serious rainstorms. If you remember, we got 6 to 8 inches in one day. The schools really took a beating, about 4 or 5 of them. We really were at every day trying to clean up, dehumidifiers, fans, following tools for schools process, and attending to teachers' requests and needs.
And as you put in these air conditioning into our schools, now we have solar paneling. So wouldn't that cut some of the costs for electric for running the air conditionings in our schools, or that?
It is helping. Utilities are on the rise. The cost of the rate increase from UI and the transmission and distribution increase has been very strong and elevating fast, but because we do have solar panels on roofs and carports, that's helping with the utility project, about $199,000, but because we're increasing square footage, increasing mechanical equipment, it's offsetting some of the savings.
I'm very happy to hear that at least it's a discussion on the Board of Ed about putting this in our schools, because I remember when Stratfield School was being renovated, we didn't have air conditioning. I think Josh, my co-colleague Josh Goskoff, could remember that on the 3rd floor of the school, during these heated days, they'd had to bring the kids down and teach outside, which is, there you go with security again. So, but thanks for everything. Thank you.
I think I had Representative Gerber next.
Hi. Bill Gerber, District 2.
Thanks for being here. I say that to everyone. And I mean it. Question about the revenue, the state and federal grants, especially the state grants. If you have any insight into what may be going on at the state level, would you be able to, do you have any probabilities or ranges on the, the probability of collecting that money? ECC, yeah, thank you.
We don't know anything more than what we put in here.
Well, do you know that, or is that just an estimate? Is that based on
The state gave us a number for
the state gives you the number for ECS?
Right.
Okay.
Now,
so it should be pretty solid, or it's, yeah.
That was in the governor's proposal, so whatever happens with that.
Okay, thank you.
What we get.
Thanks, Doreen. The second question is on healthcare. Despite having sort of the highest or one of the highest contributions by our teachers in the state, it still went up by 6.5%, about 1.4 million, which is a big chunk of the increase. So I am curious if you have insight into what that is. Is that cost of services or utilization, or and also we used to sort of keep track of how we're doing with the state plan versus what we would have been doing if we were self-insured. Are we still, this year, would that have been a positive or is it a negative? Do you have a sense for that?
Definitely a positive situation. It was a great move.
So this year alone, I know cumulative it was a great move, but we're still doing better.
Well, not this year, last year, based on last year's data.
Right.
From Aon, it was a great move.
Okay, and so the increase, is that trending with national increases, or is this doing worse than sort of the national?
We budgeted 7% based on Aon's recommendation on medical trend.
On
Aon, our
okay, yeah. That's based on the trends of what's going on in Connecticut, I guess.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think finally, just wanted to make a comment on the projections of enrollment. My personal, we've been here for 20 years or so. The projections have always been pretty bad in times of change. I think one of the reasons they're hitting their projections is it's been kind of stable, just sort of predictable movements. But we've been here in times where schools have been closed and just sort of terrible projections of and at the time we had not our current first selectman, but we had another first selectman who always said we should be able to close this school or not do this or we should hold off because the projections say that it's going to go back down, and it never did. It just kept going up. Now it may go back down, but I would put zero stock in these projections, only because I think they've hit the mark only because it's been fairly static. They could go down by a lot. They could reverse very quickly. A lot of it is, how many people move out of the state and who moves in. So if people, and big demographic shifts, it may be that people can't afford to live here. They move out. They're going to be replaced by younger people. Maybe the home prices are lower, but they may just have a lot of young kids. We just don't know. And we've made some huge, huge errors in closing schools in important places where we need those schools based on projections that have come back to bite us. So it sounds like a great idea to plan for based on projections, but unlike a business where you can suck it up with productivity, you can't do that. In a school district, you have limitations and you have to educate the kids, and what ends up happening is you rush to expand, and you end up spending more money, which is what happened last time around. You would have projected in past years reductions in average in spending, and we ended up never having those reductions based on because we closed schools and then had to like invest significantly more dollars very quickly in getting them back going. Thank you.
Further questions? I think I had Representative Spoliar next.
Marcy Spoliar, District 4. I want to get back to the certified staff additions I see. I know that, I'm not quite sure, I was wondering when you added the, in the elementary school, the program facilitators, and you said that you want to transition that into the high school for the teams, for the counseling, and I noticed that there's some additional, like there wasn't a social worker at Tomlinson this year, and that's budgeted for next year. Also, I think I remember from one of your meetings, I don't know if it was with the Board of Selectmen, you discussed building teams because we're getting more children that need assessments for special education. And I just was wondering, it also looks like the budgeted amount for this year is a lot less than the estimated amount, and I didn't know why that was.
Yeah, you have several questions in there, so we'll probably share the answers. I'm going to let Mr. Mancusi answer the specific programming that's in here for this year. The program facilitators that were new in the current budget that we're in right now, those were the IIT positions. They used to be called IIT, and we changed that position last year in the budget going into this school year. There was a minimal cost to that because we actually we got rid of all of those positions at all 11 schools and then reposted and kind of repurposed those positions differently.
And the purpose of repurposing the IITs into EPFs, which stands for Elementary Program Facilitators, is because we are a big district, we have a lot of schools, we really want to make programming, delivery of special education and 504 services, no matter what school you go to be consistent across the district. So we've had the pleasure of working with the instructional department with our EPFs to do a lot of training on implementing special education and 504 requirements across the district. And I think the feedback that we're getting is excellent so far. And we'll continue to work with them on that. The Tomlinson CLCS social worker that you mentioned in the proposed budget for the 1920 school year. This current school year, we opened up a district-wide program for our elementary students with the most significant social and emotional behaviors. It's currently at Riverfield School. We currently have 6 students who otherwise we would not be able to provide an appropriate program for in district, and the PPT would have to look for, placement in an approved private special education program. We'd have to outplace them because we wouldn't be able to appropriately maintain them in district. Some of those students now are in 5th grade. 2 of them are going into 6th grade, so they need to be programmed for appropriately at the next level. We currently are working with 2 families. We're also returning 2 kids from out of district to in district for 6th grade for next year. So they'll be returning to the Fairfield Public Schools because we'll be able to provide a middle school program similar to the program that we're now providing elementary students at Riverfield School. And then we'll be able to maintain additional students in district who are struggling. Part of being able to do that requires us to hire a licensed clinical social worker to be able to address the significant social emotional needs of these students. You also asked about evaluation teams. One of the things that came out of our special education audit that was just completed and reviewed by the board over the winter is the development of evaluation teams across the district. We're proposing we initiate that for the 1920 school year at the ECC and at the high schools. One of the things at the high schools is because we have 2 large high schools and there is hundreds of students with disabilities, we're having probably close to 1,100 planning and placement team meetings per year to address IEP issues. So as we did in developing the EPFs, the evaluation teams will also help us increase the consistency of evaluation and identification and programming at each high school across the district. So I know that was a lot of words. If it didn't answer the question, please ask for clarification.
Just a quick follow-up. I noticed that this school year, the budget's the same for the same amount of staff in the high school, but you're saying you're implementing the teams next year, but it doesn't look like you're increasing staff.
For the evaluation teams, we're increasing 1.0 FTE special education teacher. By creating the evaluation teams, we're going to be able to take a lot of the evaluations that are currently being done by staff and repurpose a psychologist and a social worker. A psychologist and a speech pathologist to be core members of that team. And then OTPT will be members of that team when appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Representative Vergara, I had you next.
Jill Vergara, District 7. I have a building capacity question. Well, a couple questions. So on page 167, all of the school building capacities are listed. Can you explain to me the difference between the building capacity and the program capacity?
So if you actually just look at Burr, where it has building capacity, the building was built for 504 students,
Yeah.
which means you have 24 classrooms, and each classroom can hold 21 students. But if you take one of those classrooms out of the rotation, for instance, at Burr, we have a CLC classroom. When you have a need for a unique program, that program was new last year or the year before. So it takes a classroom out of the rotation. You no longer have 24 classrooms that can hold 21 students. Now you have 23.
Okay.
So it's trying to help the community have a better understanding that just because it was built by that 504 term, that doesn't mean programmatically that you have those classrooms available if you're servicing the needs of the students that are there.
So really our elementary capacity is the 4,828.
As of this year and the programs that are in place, yes.
Okay, and then for that, it's really, the optimal number is 90% utilization. So really you're looking at a number closer to 4,500 if we're using the facilities optimally. Is that right?
I'm not sure I understood that
Because
question,
we aim for 90% utilization, or is it a headroom capacity? Is that what you call it?
Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question. When you look at utilization, you're still looking at the classrooms that are available that can hold students. So, what if the capacity is 470, how much of that 470 are we utilizing? That is what utilization is.
Right. So, but when you're trying to determine how many seats we actually want to or will be using in our schools, don't you actually have to multiply it by the 90%? Because we're not wanting to use these facilities at 100% capacity.
You would never, if you were at this number, yes, you would be pressing, that would be the top.
Right.
So yes.
So
that's correct. Sorry, I wasn't understanding.
Okay, because I just really wanted to put it into context of then our current enrollments and the enrollment projections. So for instance, on 122, where for next year we're projected to have 4,100 students, and you're saying that our capacity based on these numbers is closer, it's like 4,500. There's really not that much wiggle room right now in our elementary schools in terms of seats.
What I would feel better instead of answering that verbally. We have a chart that the board actually was looking at, I think 2 meetings ago, that has each building and what the capacity is right now, and it's because it depends on the building. Some of them are at max, and some of them have some room, and that's part of the discussion they're going through right now.
Okay. What is Mill Hill's capacity, and including the portables?
When you look at Mill Hill, the actual capacity of the building, that means that because we're not having portables, they're gone, and you're actually making sure you have classrooms that are available for the special needs programs. And we actually did this, I think, at last month's meeting. You have to take classrooms out of rotation. So and this is a good question in that if you went in and you just wanted to renovate that building, and you just did the flooring, you just did, paint on the walls, you did the HVAC, and you did no expansion, it should hold 273 students, which means you would be actually moving kids out of Mill Hill.
Okay, so anything that we do to Mill Hill necessarily will encompass an expansion.
If we are meeting the ed spec so that we have the correct and appropriate programming for children, yes. If we don't want children being taught on the stage and in the hall and in closets, yes.
Okay, and what about contingency plans that we have for other elementaries? So we have a school like Sherman in the flood zone, and there's a real risk that we could have another flood, and we're in a position where we have to send students to all different schools. Do we have that capacity right now to house all those students?
That's a big question the board is tackling right now.
Right now, I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of capacity, but you would be displacing children across the district. It wouldn't be there's one school that has, or two schools that have enough room right now just to split Sherman in two.
It just doesn't seem like from these numbers that we even have the capacity right now without expanding Mill Hill to a certain number, meaning 504.
Well, that is why the Board of Education put forth an ed spec for 504 seats at Mill Hill, for flexible space, for growth, for enrollment projections, the fact that more children start kindergarten in Fairfield than are born here. Education's changing. The needs of 10 years ago in schools is different now, and we don't know where it's going to be in 10 years or in 20 years. And as the population in town, right now, other committees, we have transit-oriented development, we have strategic planning, and it seems that the population growth is going to be by the 95 corridor. And with that growth, I have to think there's going to be children, which would impact those elementary schools that are by 95 and by the train station. So you're talking about Holland Hill, you're talking about Mill Hill, you're talking about Sherman, you're talking about Riverfield. And if you want to keep a neighborhood school, ideally, I would think that you would want to have as much flexible space in those elementary schools.
I mean, I think it goes even beyond that, just for a contingency plan for our town, for these issues of with the FEMA school, and also the mold that Westport had. So I just think it's, for long-term planning, it's so essential to have that capacity.
I agree with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Tallman, I think I had you.
Hi, Peter Tallman, District 8. Is Mr. Cullen, Tom? I might need you on this. Regarding heat, this is going to be mundane over the other subjects we've been talking about, but I have a couple of questions. On page 170, our heat is skyrocketing. When I'm a little confused, you see on the bottom it says the budget has $977,000, but we're projecting $811,000. This is from 18-19. And then the budget for next year is over $1 million. And I know, I think part of the problem is Ludlow in particular has had 5 additions since I went there a few years ago, with 750 less students. And I know it's a balancing act, literally a balancing act, and you have new heat, old heat.
It's projecting where we're doing additional square footage being added to the schools and new equipment. So we have to project, Fairfield Little High School got a new addition and renovation and got some new equipment on the roof. We project that Riverfield got expanded, Holland Hill's getting expanded, Sherman, Osborne Hill got a new unit on top of their gym that never had one. So we have to project the utilities based on the new equipment and the new square footage being added.
Okay.
And the rates have gone up tremendously.
This might be something for the new superintendent or Ms. Vitale. One thing I can't stand when I go into a school in January, it's 10 degrees outside, the heaters are on about 90 degrees, and the window right above it's open 3 feet. We have to start taking care of our houses a little bit better. That's just, and I talked about it with somebody, and they said, well, it's OPM. That's not going to change. I'm like, OPM? He said, it's other people's money. My heart fell into my stomach.
That's unfortunate.
And I'm not blaming anybody here. I'm just making a point. It would be nice for the 17 heads of the schools to get together with the new super and the new chair, say, we're struggling. Every penny counts. We can't waste money like that. Okay, so that's, thank you, Tom. I have another question.
Go ahead.
This might be for Mr. Mancusi. One question I haven't heard asked with what's going on with special ed, why? Why is there such an increase of social and behavioral issues? And I have an idea from some things I've read and stuff, but...
I will say one of our biggest challenges in meeting the needs of our students with disabilities is meeting the mental health needs of our students. We are greatly challenged in this area, and we're lucky we're in a community like Fairfield who is willing to invest significantly into maintaining the appropriate levels of support to support our students, because...
Excuse, I'm not asking why we're supporting the kids. Of course I want to do that. Why are we seeing such an increase of special needs kids? We should, I think, talk about the root of the problem instead of trying to help out where we can with money and stuff like that, but what's the reason?
I think there are multiple reasons, and we have had a lot of in-depth conversations from the staffing perspective about why the trend, not only in Fairfield, across Connecticut, across the United States, is trending up. And we actually were just looking at a graph where we had pulled information today, because the percentage of special needs students in Connecticut looks just like this, and if you look at the enrollment in Connecticut, it looks like this. And there are a number of factors that go into that, even if you look at the data that comes from the CDC. Our autism rate with young children is increasing by 15%. That is having an impact, and we are seeing that, and why we're adding CLCS programs for special needs children. We also know from a medical and a health perspective, if you read everything that the March of Dimes is putting out, we have more babies who are born as premature before 37 weeks, before 32 weeks, who are actually surviving. And many of those children do have special needs, and that's one reason you're seeing those areas like our ECC and early childhood that's growing. So there are a number of factors, and in our most significant programming, we have seen that number double within the last 5 to 10 years. And we're studying those numbers very closely. But it's because of the needs of the children, and we need to meet the needs of all children in the district.
Right, understood. And I know it's a lot of social and behavioral issues. I happened to see a segment on the news with some high school kids, and the interviewers said, and they had their phones, it's like, we can't live without it, social media, everything else, my friends, what's going on. One of the young women was so upset with what was going on with social media, said, I'm getting rid of my phone, I'm never going near this again, I'm done with this. The interviewer asked, how long did that last? She said, 2 days. Then I looked back at an article I'd read, and I don't get this magazine, but it's the Journal of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics, children 6 to 17. In 2012, 4% of those kids were diagnosed with anxiety. In 2017, it was
Representative Tallman, so
22%.
I'm giving you a lot of latitude. I'm
okay.
Not really seeing the connection to the budget. It's
well,
an interesting
let's talk about
discussion,
the
but
expense of the $2 million in special ed.
if you're going to tie it back to the expense and as it relates to the appropriation, I'll let it continue, but it's...
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. I have Representative Wackerman and then Representative Georgiadis.
Karen Wackerman, District 7. Thanks for being here. I wanted to follow up on something Representative Fogel said a long time ago, but I did want to see if I could dig down a little deeper. If I understood him right, I think he was asking to what extent you all work with the first selectman as you're developing the budget. And you described the process, and it didn't really sound like you do necessarily work with him. And I'm wondering why that would be, because it seems like your part of the budget is such an enormous part in the town, and this was a very big increase, and I would think you'd be kind of working together to plan on that. But so I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
What I can say from the superintendent perspective is I certainly take the guidance from the Board of Education. The first selectman and I do have those conversations, and the budget is built based on need. And then I'm taking guidance from the Board of Education, who then puts that budget forward either as the superintendent has proposed it, after they've done a tremendous amount of vetting, or they make adjustments to that budget. And we do have conversations with the first selectman. And it is challenging when sometimes it's larger than the town would like it to be, and this is one of those years. And I think we all recognize that. And the Board of Ed really diligently goes through every line in the budget, trying to make sure that what we've put forward is what we truly need for the school district.
I guess I was struck by the comment that that you felt like you should ask for what you need and then let it go through all the boards. And of course that is your prerogative, but it seems like maybe more coordination at the beginning could be helpful. I don't know. It was a lot. It was a big increase. So
it wasn't a big increase, and I could argue that maybe it wouldn't have been as big of an increase as past years. Maybe we're a little bit higher than they were. If you go back to the 10 years, there was a time when the Board of Education increase was average of 7. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been that way. Now, granted, we have had economic challenges as a nation and as a state, but this board, we get our guidance from our mission statement, and our mission is really the 10,000 students at the Fairfield Public Schools, and that is how we build our budget. And we bring it to the town, and it's up to you to decide where that fits in to the town values, town spending. A budget reflects your values. And the 9 members of the Board of Education value education, value our teachers, value the role that our school district plays as an asset to our town. We are cognizant that our town buildings are town assets. We have a responsibility to maintain them, and the budget before you reflects that. I understand that you have, sitting here tonight, you have to worry about a variety of other needs, and that is your job. My job was to really follow the mission, to give direction to the superintendent, which I feel I did, and my board did. This was a unanimous, bipartisan decision. We unanimously approved this budget. We support it moving forward, but respect the work that other town bodies need to do. And I ask you to please support it as presented to you without any further reductions. I look forward to working with all town bodies in the future to have earlier discussions about what the needs are, so there isn't a surprise later on. This year we're seeing over $500,000 in unexpected maintenance costs in this school year that we're dealing with now. In these discussions, we've talked to other town bodies that maybe it would be beneficial to bring that to you earlier. I know that this body, and during the quarterly reports, you've been getting updates about that, but maybe just more of education. I think there maybe been, you don't necessarily hear about the day-to-day challenges the Board of Education faces until it's budget season, so earlier conversations I think would benefit us all. So
yeah, I think your mission is so important. I mean, we all want the schools to continue to be as excellent as they are, but I do think it would be good to keep all of the bodies up to date so that it's not such a surprise maybe when it's a big jump like that.
I just want to also, the Board of Education, we give directions to the superintendent, but as she said, the work is done really up until days before the budget is presented. And the needs are constantly changing. You get a new student, a new maintenance challenge in a building, and the budget can be changing up to the last minute. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I will take it to heart moving forward.
Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. My question is back to maintenance. Christine, you and I are friends. I think when you throw around percentages, you have to be cognizant of the total number you're working at. 7% of $100 is a much different dollar number than 7% of 65% of the town budget. So you're not asking for 7%, you're asking for 4.59, but it's a lot of money and it impacts everything. Maintenance. I am asking that the budget money that you have this year for maintenance stays in maintenance. I just got off the Fairfield Ludlow High School building committee. It was a 6-year-long thing, and the bathrooms weren't done. And now you and I had a discussion. Now the bathrooms are a crisis and they need to be done. Mr. Cullen, you and I have had discussions in the past where I've asked you about Sherman, and you're like, oh, we'll do it in the renovation. Well, as we all know, whether it's Fairfield Ludlow High School, which goes over budget and still doesn't get the bathrooms done, or Sherman School, where you have a budget and it comes in and it's over budget. And, I've asked you for things and you said, oh, ask DPW. Well, DPW does pave the thing and give me the bike racks and do all that. So my question and my request to you is keep the money you've requested for maintenance in maintenance and don't rely on, oh, I'll save money, I'll push it off onto a school project, because as we know, Fairfield Ludlow High School is the perfect example. You have PCBs, you have unknowns, and then it lasts 6 years and it's not even complete when it's done. Will you do that? Will you keep the money for maintenance in maintenance?
That is our goal. And Sherman, we have
A goal is not the same as looking me in the eye and saying, I will try my absolute hardest. My question was for Mr. Cullen.
Well, you asked a question about committing to keeping every dollar that was budgeted to maintenance in maintenance, and that is not Mr. Cullen's decision. That is the decision of the Board of Education when the budget comes back to us and we make our budget adjustments. And I cannot make I cannot make that promise to you. It's not mine to make. It's the promise of the board, and I would be irresponsible to make that. I will do my best to keep every dollar that we possibly can in maintenance.
We need to keep our facilities updated. You guys have said
I
that.
absolutely agree with you, and
the action needs to follow the goal, the mission.
I absolutely agree with you. In Fairfield Ludlow High School, when that renovation was before town bodies, I was a member of the public that said, don't push off the bathrooms. I think you're pushing it off too soon. And at the time, based on the need at the time and the financial resources at the time, the decision was made, and I understand why it was made. You do the best that you can with the resources and the funding available, but here we are. And I use that as a learning experience as I put forth a budget that is heavier in maintenance, because I don't want to push it off.
I agree, and I also agree with you in that, and Mr. Cullen and I have talked about these with smaller projects, is that maybe you don't want to push a bathroom into a large project because you can get that done at Christmas time. You do not want to pack that into the summer. So keep those smaller things in mind for smaller opportunities and windows when the students are not in the schools, and use those maintenance dollars that are in the budget for routine maintenance. Thank you.
I think Representative Barrett's had his hand up about an hour ago, so I'm going to go to him.
Steve Barrett's District 6. I have a PPS question, and kind of goes along with that. I noticed in your special ed out-of-district placement for your appropriated budget for 18-19 and your estimated for 18-19 shows like $400,000, $500,000 of savings. Is a good portion of that attributed to the programs that, like, for instance, the one that you were talking about before at Riverfield School?
Yes, absolutely.
I would say, I I'm not saying this in any way that you should reduce the amount that you propose for 1920, but clearly this is money well spent. It's a win-win for everyone. I credit you on your forward thinking, and it's something that perhaps we can expand beyond just the middle school into the high school. And if you're looking for money to be spent in a very good way that's a win-win for the parents as well as the district, those programs are exceptional. I commend you for that.
Thank you very much. I will say that we are always looking at improving the quality of our in-district programming because we believe strongly that our staff can provide higher quality programs than many of the programs that cost thousands and thousands of dollars for outplacements.
Further questions? Representative Fogel.
David Fogel, District 1. Two comments, or a comment and a question. First of all, I'd like to thank Representative Wackerman's comments and follow-up from my earlier question. She was much more articulate than I was. But I do think it's worth noting, and I don't know how much of a question this is, but it's so important I'm going to mention it, because it's not just about this year, it's about future years too. And I do think that what she was referring to and what I was trying to articulate earlier is a flawed, for lack of a better word, process, budget process. And by the way, I'm not blaming necessarily the superintendent. I think it's almost inherent to the way the process occurs, where she is accountable to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education has very understandable primary objectives, secondary objectives, that are related to education, and they should be. But this is in the context of our overall budget, where this is 65% of that budget, and I worry a little bit, again, about going forward. The same thing's going to keep happening, because if the standard is always, delivering the requisite level of, or standard of education to our students, we could argue that that's a little bit of a gray area. It's not a specific thing. There's a range of reasonableness, so to speak. And so where you fall in that range could be the difference of millions of dollars. And if the first selectman is coming to the superintendent and maybe the Board of Education and saying, look, in this context, we have to be hyper sensitive to and attentive to cost, and we have these mandatory cost increases that we can't do anything about. So we need to do everything we can to cut costs in other areas so that the net effect of the net budget is, hopefully flat, in my opinion, but in this case, maybe a small increase. But it's hard for that to happen, to be fair, given the way this whole process is set up. So that's a comment. If you want to respond, feel free, but.
And I might just add that from the superintendent's standpoint, that's what we do we really have been doing every year, and especially these last couple of years. This budget is reflective of everything else in our budget is like 0.6. Very, very small increase, and that's because we're trying to find, can we repurpose positions? Can we go without these materials and find a more effective way to instruct in the classroom? We are looking at literally, all the time. We've cut out most of our summer professional development, and we've looked for other ways for that to happen. We have looked at where can we cut out overtime. So if we have 4 custodians in the evening, we're not going to get a sub when somebody's out sick. We're going to run with 3. We literally, every department leader is doing that right now to make sure we're bringing as efficient of a budget as we can, not only in staffing but in resources.
Okay, thank you. One more question. There was a comment made earlier, I don't see the gentleman, he might have left, but about facility expansion. This is, I think, in response to Mr. Tallman's question. I could be wrong. Representative Tallman, sorry. And I think the word was extensive or something, facility expansion. And that surprised me. Why are we, and I understand maintenance, for sure. I think these are all legitimate points about maintenance, but why would we be expanding facilities if our enrollment has gone down 5% over the last 8 years and is projected to go down another 5% over the next 8 years? Why would we be doing any significant expansion or any expansion?
Well, those expansions have happened, number one, over time, not all in one year. And if you look at any school district enrollment, if you look at it over time, there really aren't huge shifts. I mean, you talk about it in percentages, but having the space available, it takes years to get a building built. I mean, we just heard somebody talk about just windows taking 6 years. So the board, when they have built and expanded a school, and you heard us mention the 504 number, making sure that you have that capacity available so that we don't get back into the situation where we have 75, I think it was 75 portables, how many, 62? All across the district, because when you have those spikes and changes, even if it's slow, it kind of seems slow, 4 or 5 years, it's not slow when it's a building project. It takes a year just to get to the planning piece. So in our elementaries, when we have done that, they're built for 504 students. So we've added over 100,000 square feet. When we have done those projects, and we haven't added any extra staff in our maintenance department to handle that 100,000 square feet. They've just absorbed it, and that's an area where, again, they're trying to run as efficient as they can, having all of their square footage per custodian, for instance, go up.
Do you foresee continued expansion in facilities, even if our population is flat or down 5%? Because of the change, the mix, the need for 504 or whatever.
I mean, I don't know if Mr. Telly wants to answer that. I think that's a future question, and time tells what you need right now. I mean, if the high schools, let's say this trend where students are not going to private school continues. Our high schools are both at capacity right now. So, in 5 years from now, if that continues to happen and Fairfield Public Schools is more attractive than the private schools in this area, that could cause a different discussion. So you can't really look necessarily 10 years out on some of those. Right now, the project that is before the board really is Mill Hill. That's being discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussions, Representative Lopez?
Hi, Erin Lopez, District 2. Just two really quick things. That kind of scares me when you say that the high schools are at capacity, considering that big bubble of students is going to be in 8th grade next year, and then high school the year after, when we already have two at capacity high schools, and you think people might not be going to private school. So that kind of scares me for the kind of numbers that are coming up in a couple of years, having a child in that grade. And then your answer just a few minutes ago about how carefully you look at expenses and trying to keep things away from the kids, it just really kind of underscores for me the shock at the rollout of the Chromebook. Just one more thing on Chromebooks. Of the rollout, because you kind of said it's about ripping a Band-Aid off and getting it out there. As a parent and as an RTM member, I really was just kind of shocked that the parent education piece wasn't there. You don't know if we're going to keep them over the summer. You don't know if we should sign something to, who the liability and things like that. I just really have been kind of disappointed in how this whole thing came out as a parent who's dealing with this, and I really hope that this is cleared up before the end of the school year, and that it's much more clear moving forward as more kids get into this program with using the Chromebooks.
Yeah, and I think we can always get better at what we do in the first year of rolling out is the most challenging. So, that's a point well taken. We did do the parent meetings at the beginning of the year, the meetings with the students, making sure that they were signing, for them. We did, admittedly, we changed the model right at the end of last year, and it was more cost effective, and it is what our educators believed was the best way to educate our children. And it is essential for us it's almost malpractice in today in education to not be giving the students the access that they need. And again, I really encourage any of you that are wondering, how important it is, just look at the assessments that your young people and your little children are being asked to take. And any of you that have had our students who've already taken Next Generation Science Standard assessment, ask them how difficult that was. And across the state, everybody is going to be really challenged going into next year just from what we're going to learn from that assessment, because most of us across the state, I would say almost every district, feels like we're not quite ready for it because it's more advanced than where the school districts are. But I do understand it's a learning curve, and we can always communicate more effectively and do a better job. So thank you for that.
Further questions? Representative Walk?
Jaywalk, District 5. I just want to echo, I've been using that word tonight, to Representative Georgiadis, and I share her passion, what she's talking about with maintenance, and going back to that for a second. But I have to tell you, since I've come on the RTM personally, former Chairman Mottola used to say, we just keep kicking things down, we keep kicking the can down the road with maintenance. And I have to tell you that since I've been on the board and coming to this day, today, I think personally that, Mr. Cullen has done a wonderful job, and I think that we've got to, we know we have more to do with the maintenance of the schools. We know that. And it has to do with the budgets that you guys are not getting. And the $700,000 may have helped out this year. We don't know. But I think, and I'll end it right here, that we've come a long way with our schools and maintenance. And since I've started, I mean, I can tell you when and even going back to Representative Iacono, when she was the Board of Ed chairman, and we were at Riverfield School, and I'll never forget, how long that took just to renovate Riverfield schools. It's not an overnight project. It takes years. Stratfield School was years till we finally got that done. So we're at a point right now where I think we're going in the right direction. And, eventually we're all going to get catched up with maintenance. And, and I think we're all on the same page no matter what party we're in. We all want what's best for our kids, and we all want safety for our schools, and window safeties and better windows and things. So I thank you for everything, okay? And I'm going to miss you, Dr. Jones, too. Thank you.
And I don't want my comments about maintenance and adding to this budget in any way to reflect that Mr. Cullen has not doing his due diligence, or that our buildings are in disrepair. These are buildings that are 100 to, our newest renovation. It's a challenge, and he has managed it for many years to keep our buildings well-maintained and safe and secure. But as we know from the, I think did they get the spreadsheet of the level 2 projects? If not, we'll forward it to you. As he said, there are many projects that don't get done, even just painting. So we're just trying to not wait to the very last minute, kind of.
Like we have been doing up until this point, pretty much.
And many of the maintenance projects in this budget you'll see are HVAC, to go back to the concerns expressed about humidity and heat. Thank you.
I was just one last thing. I was just amazed that when I think it was Fairfield Ludlow Middle School that was built, but it wasn't built with air conditioning in it. It was at the school. It was one of the schools has partial air conditioning when that school was built, but I'm not quite sure. Is that true?
Roger Ludlow Middle School is air conditioned. I mean, the air conditioning came up as part of whether or not to fund it when the last Fairfield Ludlow High School renovation was done.
Right.
There was a talk of adding more AC, and I think the cost of that, the estimate was $8 million to air condition that school at the time.
Well, now to put it in, it's going to be more. No? Yeah.
I would think so. That's why the board is looking to bring on a consultant to come and look at our buildings and see what the costs will be, because it's not just AC. You have to make sure that the electrical system can support that, which I think, I did not necessarily realize that you're going to be ripping apart ceilings, and it's not just putting in an AC unit.
Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Vergara.
Jill Vergara, District 7. I really loved that first chart that you put in the budget book. I wanted to commend you for it. I think that it helps to contextualizes the budget increases really well, and I think it's really effective. One thing that I would recommend possibly including is also the ECS funding and how it's changed over the years, because that is an important piece to the context, and it's important to transparency for everybody reading this budget book to understand that we might be spending, having these lower average increases because we're getting that much less from the state. So when you look at it, and we were getting, 3.6 million for most of these years, and it dropped down to 1.7, then 1.5, then 900 last year. It would really, I think, help clarify some things.
Representative Bove, did you have something?
it's already on. Representative Bove, District 7. I just want to thank you for everything you're doing for the schools. As a parent of 2 kids, one is already through the system. It's prepared him very well for college. And I have a positive thing on the Chromebooks. I was surprised when I saw it, and I wasn't sure how it got through the budget. I wasn't here then. But it's been really helpful for my child. We don't have the money to buy him his own laptop, so he's been disadvantaged in a way. You know, my husband works at home at night, and so do I, so the computer is unavailable to him, but he's always requesting to use it. Now he can, and there's one dedicated to him. It's excellent. It does exactly what I want it to do and nothing more. And he doesn't use it for anything. He really can't use it for anything. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Iacono?
Can you hear me now? I just want to wrap up by saying I hope, Mrs. Vitale, as the former chair to the current chair, I applaud you. It's a really, really, really difficult seat to be in. I couldn't wait to get out of mine. I hope that your board has watched what I call the bouncing ball, starting with the Board of Selectmen, then at the Board of Finance, and now tonight at the RTM, and I'm so pleased to see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle championing the maintenance issue. And I really, really hope that all 9 of you look at this budget and keep the money in maintenance as a reoccurring theme at the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM. I know you can't speak for your board. I know all of that information. I just want to leave that as a summary to you because I've watched all that. I've heard all that tonight. I've been on the Board of Ed. I know what it's like to push off new educational initiatives. It's hard, but we have major, major themes going on in this town, and we are the ones that are in our districts, and I know you hear it too from parents, but we're the reps that hear from them, and overwhelmingly it's becoming maintenance. A couple years ago it was what are we going to do with initiatives, but now I'm just hearing over and over again why something as simple as getting paint in a library is just becoming an issue. And to that end, I just have one request, if you guys could follow up, you know, at your convenience and get back to us. Can you send us a list of the new initiatives that you are proposing in this budget, not related to special ed? So for example, rolling out Chromebooks to 6th graders. Is that, if that's in here, I apologize, but is it on a specific page? You know, Representative Herron touched on something that was embedded in something else that's not easy to find. You know, with the digital stuff at the K-2, if there's an easy way to do that on a cheat sheet, that'd be great. And I apologize if it's already in here somewhere. But that would be very helpful. The Math Academy, just something on one page that summarizes, but I don't want anything related to SPED. I understand the requirements behind that and, you know, our obligations to, you know, the requirements, the federal and state requirements behind that. And thank you.
Further questions? Representative Bove?
While it's still on, I just asked my son who's in high school about the bathrooms and the maintenance, and I said, how are the bathrooms? He's a boy at, obviously, at the high school. And I said, what's up with the bathrooms? He said, they're worn down, the sinks are broken, and they don't have dividers between the urinals. So that's one high schooler's thoughts. And what did you? Oh, and the urinals are too low. Apparently, they're taller than you'd expect. That's
I can't.
I guess urinals are a big deal for boys.
For some guys.
Further discussion?
That's how we're ending things.
different boys. Alex's son too.
Our children.
I'm not just the only weird one.
The consumers.
Bill, it's off.
Get on that.
You were off.
What is that?
Passover, fast.
Can I just for one, Ms. Iacono, the information technology on page 152, there's just more detail on technology, and the targeted enhancements are at the beginning of the budget book, but we'll look at see if there's anything else. And it may be in some of the Board of Ed questions. I know we asked a lot of questions, and it may just be in the backup material. Will do. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you. All right, we'll adjourn.